Chapter 351, Courting Death. Located on the Coastal Park, the Avenue of Stars was a road built on the bay for sightseeing. It was late at night and there were no tourists here, but many people were having fun inside the Coastal Park. The Coastal Park was relatively large in size, with a mature commercial entertainment system. At the entrance, about 20 people were waiting for Zhang Han. They were the best photography team in the Royal Entertainment Company, including makeup staff, logistics staff, and so on. When they saw the awesome Bugatti Veyron coming, many of them got envious. They're coming. Sister Zhang is here. There are also 3 Mercedes-Benzes this time. Under all people's attention, the 4 cars were parked over there. Bang, bang, bang. With the sounds of doors being opened and closed, everyone got out. Zhang and Zif came over, followed by Leng and the others. Looking at the appearance of the 6 women, everyone was stunned. The 6 women, all in black suits, leather shoes, and white shirts, looked very capable and experienced. Moreover, every one of them was wearing headphones, with an indifferent face. Looking at them, everyone would think of the following words: professional bodyguards. Teacher Ma, sorry, I'm a bit late. Zhang walked up to a middle-aged man in his 40s, who had a lot of grey hair, and said hello with a smile. Teacher Ma was the person in charge and the leader of the photography team. After the last incident, the whole company was very polite to Zhang. Teacher Ma was no exception. If it was someone else, he would probably have thrown a tantrum after waiting for 20 minutes. However, he smiled enthusiastically and said, "You're not too late, it's perfect timing. Go to put on makeup and change your clothes, we'll start shooting soon." Okay. Zhang nodded and then walked into the limo next to her with Zif and a female makeup artist. After closing the door, they began to prepare inside. Leng waved her hand to the others around her, and then, 4 of them scattered, standing in the 4 directions of the team respectively. Leng and another person stood in front of the car door, with indifferent faces. Their expressions seemed to be saying, "Do not come near." They looked very scary. However, their training was not over yet and they didn't have much expertise. If some veterans saw them, they would say that some of their details were not professional. Even if they were already martial arts with obvious strength, a lot of knowledge still needed to be accumulated over time. At the same time, a gathering of young people was taking place in a villa not far away. There were about 20 people, and they were having a great time. The villa was not small and there was an open-air balcony on the 2nd floor with an open-air swimming pool. A few bikini girls and young men were playing around. At the edge of the balcony, 4 people were sitting at a small table. A middle-aged man next to them was grilling and he occasionally put some skewers on the table. If Zif was here, she would definitely know one of those men, Li Cheng. After taking a mouthful of mutton and drinking some beer, he looked at the opposite young man very respectfully and smiled. "Brother Feng, I heard that your uncle came back and warned Hong Kitao." The man sitting opposite him was Ge Long's nephew, Ge Pengfeng, whose leg was broken earlier. Looking at Ge Pengfeng's appearance, with an elliptical face and dark circles, people would feel that he was an easygoing person. If he was not so arrogant and frivolous, he would be very approachable. However, everyone who was familiar with him knew that he was a very difficult person. He was narrow-minded, picky, and wouldn't show any mercy. "Warning?" Ge Pengfeng snorted and said, "You're looking down on my uncle." "Oh no, I just heard about it." Li Cheng hurriedly shook his head. Ge Pengfeng grinned and said, "Since my uncle decided to interfere, would it be a simple warning? Then what is it, Brother Feng? Please tell us." Another yellow-haired young man was eager to know the truth. "All right, I'll tell you." Ge Pengfeng drank some beer, and disdain appeared in his eyes. Then he said, "Last time, Hong Li took the advantage when I was not on guard, so my uncle asked him to come with Ninai to make up for his mistake for 3 days. 3 days? What does this mean?" The yellow-haired man asked in confusion. "Are you stupid? Another fat man with a flat-top haircut looked at him with contempt while saying, "What do you think it means? It's so simple that Brother Feng can do whatever he wants to them for those 3 days." All other people could understand the meaning by reading between the lines. Ha ha ha, Gepengfing laughed and said, "Yes, for 3 days, I'll do whatever I like. Hong Li hired people to beat me, right? Since he broke one leg of mine, I'll break both of his legs. And that bitch Ran Ninai, I've given her so many chances, this time, I'll torture her badly." At the end, there was some eagerness and coldness in Gepengfing's words. Thinking of the thrill of getting revenge, he got very excited. With a smile in his eyes, he lit a cigarette and took a deep breath. Ha ha ha, Ran Ninai is so beautiful, with white skin and a cute face. Brother Feng will enjoy that. I'm really envious. The yellow-haired man smirked. Oh? Gepengfing narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at that man, saying, "Do you want to give it a try? Me?" That man's eyes widened and he felt a little excited. Then he hesitantly asked, "Can I?" "Of course you can." Gepengfing sneered twice and said, "I'll make that little bitch never forget those 3 days. All of you can come then." Ha ha, thank you, Brother Feng. The yellow-haired man laughed. "Thank you, Brother Feng." Li Cheng also laughed. He liked this kind of interaction very much, which could make him closer to Brother Feng. In addition, he heard that Ran Ninai was very pretty with a cute face like a little girl. Since he couldn't win the heart of his goddess, Xian, he could still get some comfort from that beautiful girl. After talking for a while, Gepengfing suddenly looked at Li Cheng and asked, "Are there any good-looking chicks in your company recently? Why haven't I heard anything from you?" "Ah." Li Cheng paused and then said with disappointment, "Xuanhuan is not bad, you know. She's just so-so. It wouldn't be fun after playing with her a few times. Forget it." "Is there anyone else?" Gepengfing asked. "No." Li Cheng shook his head, and suddenly, his eyes lit up when he thought of Xian. Her supporter was Hong Kitao, who was just like a mouse in front of a cat when facing Gepengfing. It seemed that if Gepengfing tried to take down Xian, she definitely couldn't resist. Hiss. Thinking of that, Li Cheng's heartbeat accelerated. He was very excited and said quickly, "Oh yes, there is one girl. She's a stunning beauty, like a goddess. You must have heard of her." "Oh, who's that?" Gepengfing and the others got interested and their eyes lit up. "Xian." Li Cheng replied excitedly, even his voice was a little trembling. "Xian, huh? She's working at your company?" Gepengfing suddenly remembered that he had seen a lot of Xian's photos when he was listening to the songs recently. He also paid attention to her before and regarded her as a goddess. "She's working at your company? Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Gepengfing stared at Li Cheng while speaking. "Oh, it's just that, she came back less than a month ago and I just got the news," Li Cheng replied quickly. "It's like this." Gepengfing narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, "She's good, I like that. Ask her to come here right now." "Well, I can't do that." Li Cheng smiled bitterly and said, "She's quite influential in the company, I can't offend her." "Oh right, I heard that she's backed by Hong Kitao." "Just Hong Kitao? Is that what you called influential?" Ha ha ha. Gepengfing laughed, full of disdain. He felt that this beauty would be his for sure, so he said, "Make an appointment tomorrow, tell her that I invited her." "Well, then I'll try tomorrow, but I know her character, I'm afraid she may not agree. What if I fail to ask her out?" Li Cheng asked. "It doesn't matter if you fail, then I'll do that personally. I like a beauty with a temper, no need to rush. I'll go for her after dealing with Ran Ninai," Gepengfing said casually. Then, everyone began to talk about other topics, such as what sports cars or yachts they had bought. Gepengfing didn't know that because of the reminder of Li Cheng, a kind-hearted buddy of his, he was about to take a dangerous path. All the people were still talking. That man glanced sideways and was surprised. Then he said, "Huh? Some people seem to be filming there." "Filming?" Everyone turned around and looked over. It wasn't far away, so they could clearly see those people's actions down there. When they were looking, it just so happened that the limo door was opened. Under those men's gazes, a beauty in a crystal dress, with long hair and a silver crown, was walking forward slowly. She seems so hot. The eyes of the fat man with the flat-top haircut lit up. Poof! Li Cheng found that those people were so familiar. Isn't that Teacher Ma's team from the company? Isn't that Bugatti Xian's car? And that beauty? She's Xian. Li Cheng said that after coughing twice. Is that Xian? Gu Pengfing stared at her with his eyes narrowed for a while. He couldn't see her face clearly. But with a crystal dress and a crown, she looked like a princess from a fairy tale world. What a coincidence! It's fate. Li Cheng, go to invite her to drink with us, Gu Pengfing ordered. Only me? I'm worried that she won't come. Li Cheng was a little discouraged by Xian, so he hesitated at that moment. She's working for your company, yet you still can't invite her. Your father is a fake chairman, isn't he? Gu Pengfing gave him a stare. All right, I'll go invite her. Li Cheng gritted his teeth while he stood up and walked to the room, ready to go downstairs to invite her. I'll also go and see. The fat man with a flat-top haircut staggered to follow him. Li Cheng looked at him and said nothing. He was not confident. Could he do it? Chapter 352, Black Eyes. You guys, come with me. Coming downstairs, Li Cheng spoke to the 4 bodyguards of Gu Pengfing who were standing at the door. Sometimes, bodyguards could also be a deterrent. He planned to invite her nicely first. If he failed, he'd have the bodyguards go and ask. After he said that, the 4 people just looked at him indifferently and didn't move. Then, Li Cheng's mouth trembled slightly and he said helplessly, "It's Mr. Gu's order. Come with me to invite a girl." "Stop standing here, hurry up, come with us," the fat man urged. One of the bodyguards nodded his head and took out his mobile phone to call for instructions. After getting the approval, they started to follow them to the shooting site not far away. At that time, in the front, Xian stood alone on the curbside and there were several cameras next to her that had just been adjusted to a good angle. Xian, look straight ahead later on, be elegant, just like a princess, stand straight, keep the posture. It'd be better if you smiled, but don't smile too much. A faint smile would be enough, right? That's what I want. Keep it. Countdown. 3, 2, 1, action. With his order, Xian moved forward slowly and gracefully with a faint smile on her face. She walked about a dozen meters. Good. One take. Teacher Ma applauded and said, "You've proved yourself to be an actor. Your expressions and postures are just perfect." Okay, next scene. Xian, lift your dress a little with your right hand. Smile happily this time, like a cheerful girl. Run, jump, and make circles. Okay. Xian nodded. Then, she tried to make herself happy. 3, 2, 1. Just as Teacher Ma was about to say action, a call came from not far behind. "Teacher Ma, are you recording an MV here?" Everyone turned their heads and saw Li Cheng, who took the lead. Teacher Ma was a bit unhappy about the sudden interruption because he usually looked down on that Mr. Li, who always came to the company to flirt with girls. He responded with a dull expression and turned his head, saying, "Okay, everyone, get ready." "Wait, stop shooting," Li Cheng said quickly. "What are you doing?" Teacher Ma turned his head again and looked at Li Cheng, who was in front of him. He was dissatisfied, but still said calmly, "Mr. Li, we have a lot of tasks tonight. We'll still have to go to another 5 places after this." The implication was, "You're not one of us, can you just leave?" Li Cheng smiled lightly and didn't care at all. He waved his hand and said, "It's not a big deal to delay the filming for a while." As Teacher Ma frowned and wanted to ask how long it would take, the fat man next to Li Cheng opened his mouth. "Is this beauty Xian? She's really beautiful. Brother Feng is drinking at the villa behind us and he wanted to invite you over." "Beauty? Please." As soon as he heard that, Teacher Ma was stunned and stopped saying anything. They called that man Brother Feng and were asked to invite the girl. That must be some powerful person, too. He was only a leader of the photography team, who couldn't offend those rich young masters. At the same time, he also sighed in his heart. Beautiful women are dangerous. Beautiful women are always the root cause of disputes. Teacher Ma sighed in the heart, but since Xian also brought bodyguards with her, it seemed that he didn't need to say anything. Under everyone's attention, Xian shook her head slightly and refused coldly. I don't know Brother Feng. Xian, Li Cheng sighed and tried to persuade her. Why are you so stubborn? I invited you 3 times just to make friends with you. Now, such a hypocrite, don't you feel ashamed to say that? Zif satirized him from behind. Li Cheng was stunned after hearing that. Oh, it seems that you're not popular at your place, are you? The fat man joked. His status was higher than that of Li Cheng, and he found it interesting to view such a scene. Li Cheng's dad is one of the board members, yet it seems that he isn't that influential. The employees in his company dare to mock him face to face. The fat man's words made Li Cheng feel a little humiliated and the smile on his face gradually disappeared. He glanced at Zif and then looked at Xian. Xian, ask your little follower to watch her mouth. She spoke the truth. Xian blinked her beautiful eyes and answered very seriously. Xian really hated a hypocrite such as Li Cheng. Her words made many of the staff members on the scene almost burst into laughter. She rarely spoke, but when she did, it was hurtful. This made Li Cheng a bit angry. You're making me lose face. He gritted his teeth and said in a deep voice, whether you'll go or not, let me tell you first who this Brother Feng is. His full name is Gepeng Feng and his uncle is a real big shot. Even Hong Kitao must respect him. I heard that Hong Kitao had to apologize to his uncle in person recently. I won't talk about the details. What I want to tell you is that Brother Feng is in a good mood today and he wanted to invite you over. He's in the villa over there, and more than a dozen people are having a party. You can go to sit for a while and come back to shoot later. It won't affect anything. Sorry, I refuse. Xian didn't want to talk with him and directly refused. Li Cheng was stunned by that. The fat man next to him was also stunned, but then he laughed and clapped his hands while saying, oh, good. Beauty, you have such a hot temper, but a beauty's words are always right. Ha ha, what a perfect figure. Look at the curves. DSK, DSK. The fat man looked Xian up and down while praising her. However, he didn't know that his words had made Leng frown. She stared at him coldly with a tight body, and the position of her right hand showed that she was ready to attack him. Their task was to protect Xian, though Zhang Han didn't say anything to them. Zhao Feng did. He said, if anyone dares to harass Madam, attack him directly, no matter who he is. The fat man surely didn't know about that and was still wagging his head while saying, Beauty, just come with us. Brother Feng has a good temper and he just wants to make friends with you. What's the big deal? He asked us to come and invite you. If you refuse, he'll blame us. And look at these bodyguards behind me, they are Brother Feng's. But before he finished speaking, attack. As soon as Leng made a gesture, the 2 women beside her and the other 3 on the side rushed over at the same time. They were very fast and approached the fat man within only 3 breaths. The fat man was totally shocked and felt a bit confused. What does this mean? These women want to beat me? Fortunately, the bodyguards behind them were also well trained. At that moment, they stared at those women coldly and moved forward, keeping the fat man and Li Cheng behind them. Swish, 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 bang, bang, bang. In the face of those women's attacks, the 4 bodyguards took defense and tried to block their fists and easily take them down. However, even though what they imagined was beautiful, the reality was cruel. Those bodyguards raised their left arms to defend from their fists and were ready to launch attacks with their right hands. But when the fists fell, zoom, in an instant, they felt that their left arms had suffered tons of damage. The places that were hit by the fists were extremely painful. Then, they became numb. It was like when you squatted for too long, your legs would become numb. Their pain was 10 times greater than that, and they even felt that their arms were not their own. What is this power? The bodyguards were shocked and looked at those women in awe, knowing that they were no match for them at all. They wanted to pull back. However, when they just moved backward half a step, their second punches came quickly. Facing this round of attacks, the 4 men could only extend their right hands to resist. They became smart this time, planning to use their palms to defend and take advantage of that force to step backward. However, like slaps in their faces, the fists met their palms and their entire right arms had gone numb before they took their palms back. How is that possible? They couldn't figure out how those women did that. In the next moment, those women kicked them a few times. In other people's eyes, their movements were chic and aesthetic. Meanwhile, those who were being beaten were suffering unbearable pain. After a few kicks, they stepped back 7 or 8 steps and sat down on the ground in shock. That scene also made the surrounding staff members shocked. It seemed that both those men and women were bodyguards. But how did the males lose to females? They are so powerful. Everyone sighed with emotion and many women were very proud. Who said that women are not as good as men? Even Xian and Zuf were a little surprised. They hadn't expected them to be so powerful. There was some curiosity in Xian's eyes. It's so strange. Zhao Feng and Ahu are powerful. The 6 women, including Leng, are also powerful. They work for the security company and are in the charge of Xiao Feng. All of them are awesome. Xiao Feng is Zhang Han's disciple. Doesn't that mean Zhang Han is more powerful than them? Thinking of that, Xian was slightly stunned. Is Zhang Han very powerful? Since he's Xiao Feng's master, he should be. Just when Xian was thinking, Leng went over to Li Cheng and the fat man quickly. The 2 men suddenly came to their senses. What are you doing? The fat man asked angrily. Go away. Li Cheng yelled. The 2 of them spoke as they stepped back, but they found that the woman's fist was getting bigger and bigger in their eyes. Bang, bang. After hitting them in their eyes, Leng kicked them down on the ground. Get lost. Leng looked at the people on the ground and said coldly. Hearing her harsh words, Li Cheng, the fat man, and all the bodyguards quickly stood up and ran back. Oh my right eye hurts so much, I can't open it, Li Cheng said in great pain. I can't open my left eye as well, everything in front of me is so vague, am I going blind? The fat man was worried. Let me see, it seems to be fine, no bleeding, it's just a black eye. You also have a black eye. The 2 of them looked at each other and wanted to cry. In fact, they could endure pain and merely couldn't see things so clearly. It would be fine in a few days. However, how could they go out to meet people with black eyes? They hurried back to the open-air balcony on the 2nd floor of the villa. Everyone who saw them along the way felt it so strange. Where did they go? Why are they back with black eyes? What happened to you 2? Gu Pengfing asked with a frown. We were beaten up. That beauty has a few bodyguards and they beat us, the fat man said in a miserable tone. What did you say? Gu Pengfing stood up suddenly and then said with a darkened face, let's go. As he spoke, he was about to go out. However, after just taking 2 steps, he stopped to look at the 4 bodyguards, who covered their arms with their hands, and said hesitantly, did you also go with them just now? Yes, we were also beaten up, one of them said with a bitter smile. There were 6 female bodyguards with excellent skills, we're no match for them. Huh? Gu Pengfing was stunned. The truth was that he had paid a high price to hire these 4 bodyguards. You even can't beat up a few women? Useless. The yellow-haired man sneered, and then looked at Gu Pengfing, saying, Brother Feng, let's go fight them. Gulp. Gu Pengfing swallowed his saliva. He remembered last time when his leg was broken. Since we're no match for them, why go there, to court death? You go there alone. Gu Pengfing said angrily and then waved to the 4 bodyguards. You guys can leave. Yes. The bodyguards nodded and then left. Then, Li Cheng and the fat man sat down. Brother Feng, so were we beaten for no reason? The fat man rubbed his eyes gently and asked, otherwise? So, that's it? Li Cheng was not resigned to that. Under the eyes of so many people in the company, he was beaten up. It would be embarrassing for him to go to the company in the future. How could it be? Gu Pengfing narrowed his eyes slightly and then said, a few days later, my dad will hold a birthday party for my mom. The people who will attend that celebrity party will all be from the entertainment circle. Li Cheng, I'll ask my dad to call your dad later and invite some people in your company to come over. At that time, we'll deal with them seriously. Good. Li Cheng thought for a while before he nodded heavily. Chapter 353, A Sweet Life. At the shooting site. When Li Cheng and the others ran away, the eyes of many staff members on the scene gradually widened. They looked at each other and began to discuss it. Wow, they are amazing. They beat them down in just a few moves. Their movements were cool. Mr. Li has a black eye now. Ha ha ha. I guess he won't be going to the company during this period. Even Teacher Ma didn't know what to say for the moment. After taking a look at Xian, then Zif, and then Leng and the other bodyguards, he swallowed his saliva and didn't say anything. Zif ran over to Leng and the others from the side, and then looked them up and down while saying, wow, you're so powerful, that was amazing. How can you be so strong? Who taught you? You're more powerful than male bodyguards. Look, your bodies are all very well proportioned, but you have great strength. Zif was amazed and couldn't stop praising them. Xian grinned after seeing that. She looked at Leng and the others with admiration, and then nodded. Then, she looked at Teacher Ma and said, Teacher Ma, let's continue, shall we? There were still a lot of tasks to complete this night. She wanted to go back early after the filming, and there would be other tasks tomorrow afternoon. She was extremely busy these days. Oh, okay, let's continue. Photographers, find a good angle. Okay, get ready. All the people continued to work. Nobody went to harass them after that. Ever since Gu Pengfing got beaten up last time, he learned to be smart. Although he wanted to force Xian to come here, he couldn't beat her bodyguards, so he definitely would not go. However, now that he already had a goal, he would play this game seriously. He firmly believed that his uncle Gu Quanlong was the most powerful man. Even if he made some trouble, his uncle would deal with it. After shooting for more than an hour, everyone got in the cars and went to another place, which was still in the northern area. They also shot at some other places later, and including the time on the way, they didn't stop until 5 o'clock. Well, we've completed the tasks for today. Go back to rest. Remember to meet at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. After the filming, Teacher Ma said to everyone, wow, we're finally finished. Let's have some breakfast before going to sleep. Okay, I want to have some porridge. You guys, go ahead. I'm too sleepy. I'll go straight to sleep. The staff members talked to each other for a short while. At this time, Xian got out of the limo in the clothes she wore when she came earlier. With a light pink hat, she waved her hand to all the people and said, you've all worked hard, thank you. Bye-bye. Don't mention it, it's our pleasure. Teacher Ma smiled. Many others were also waving goodbye. Bye, Sister Xian. Bye, Sister Zif. Sister Xian, take care. Under everyone's gaze, Xian and Zif got in the Bugatti Veyron, while Leng and the others got in the Mercedes-Benz and took the lead to New Moon Bay. Should I tell him first? Xian took out the mobile phone from the bag and put it back after thinking for a while. She thought that because it was only 5 o'clock, Zhang Han probably hadn't gotten up, so she dropped the idea. Play some music. Xian adjusted her sitting position. Zif turned on the radio casually and the song that was playing happened to be The Most Beautiful Expectation. I embraced love. When I woke up from my dreams, you waited persistently, and never left. Listening to her own music, Xian looked at the scenery outside the window and went into a trance. She had worked for an entire night and it was almost dawn, but she didn't feel very sleepy, just a little tired, so she lay against the seat languidly. After more than half an hour, the team of cars returned to the restaurant. After Xian and Zif got out of the car, Leng said goodbye and returned to the company. I wonder if the door is locked. If it is, we won't be able to get in. Zif stared at the restaurant store and said, I have the key. Xian took out the keychain from her pocket and shook it. When they walked to the door, they found that the door was not locked at all. So Xian pushed the door and went in lightly. She didn't make much noise. The two of them walked in. Xian took one step and then looked up. After seeing the figure who was working in the kitchen, Xian was stunned. Has he gotten up? Is he preparing breakfast for me in the kitchen? Looking at Zhang Han's figure, Xian suddenly wanted to cry. Tears welled up in her eyes. She was touched. Her heart was gonna melt. You're back. Zhang Han looked up at the two of them and smiled, saying, take a rest first. I made steamed stuffed buns, and they'll be ready in another 10 minutes. Zhang Han made the small steamed buns with 3 kinds of stuffing, pork, beef, as well as leek and egg. There were 2 kinds of meat and 1 kind of vegetarian stuffing. Because Zhao Feng and the others also ate the ingredients on the mountain and he would replenish the food whenever it was needed, Zhang Han could eat whatever he wanted. Not like the last time when he wanted to eat pork and he had to kill a pig and make a big pig feast. Xian bit her lower lip lightly and blinked her big eyes. After holding back her tears, she walked over and put the bag on the sofa. I'll go upstairs to wash my face. Looking at Xian's expression, Zif felt that the two of them would have some intimate acts, so she left quickly and ran to the 2nd floor. Xian walked into the kitchen and stood beside Zhang Han. Zhang Han was still making small buns. When he saw Xian was approaching, he stopped working and looked at Xian with a smile. Hug me. With her red lips slightly curled up, Xian extended her arms and said, there is flour all over my body, Zhang Han reminded her. There was flour on his apron and hands, and it would stain Xian's clothes if he hugged her. Hug me, Xian said again. Zhang Han smiled and spread his arms. The beauty was so positive. She hugged Zhang Han tightly and was gently smelling Zhang Han's neck with her eyes closed. It seemed that there was a faint fragrance, which was masculine and made her feel hot. It's great to have you, like a kitten. Xian moved slightly in Zhang Han's arms and said softly, you are my baby. Zhang Han said gently, with his eyes filled with softness, I love you. With her head moving backward and standing on tiptoes, Xian pecked Zhang Han on his lips. After pecking 3 times, she stopped and wrapped her hands around Zhang Han's neck. She looked up, staring at Zhang Han with her big bright eyes. If electricity could be discharged through the eyes, the power released by them at this moment might be able to support the restaurant for a whole day. You've worked all night. Are you tired? Zhang Han smiled softly with his eyes a little narrowed, and then he said, go sit for a while and have a good rest after breakfast. I'll give you a massage before you go to sleep. Meow. Xian nodded obediently and kissed him again. Then, she walked out of the kitchen happily and took her bag upstairs to prepare for washing up. She felt particularly happy at the moment. Being held in the palm as a treasure, being loved, and being cared for meticulously by such a man made her much happier and gentler. She felt so lucky to have Zhang Han as her husband. She became intoxicated with such a sweet life. He made 3 trays of steamed stuffed buns for Xian and Zuf, which would be quite enough for the two of them. There was still a lot of stuffing. After Meng got up and cleaned up, he would make breakfast for her. And because he had prepared a lot of stuffing, not only the VIP members, but also the ordinary clients could eat the steamed stuffed buns if they came early. Chapter 354, I'm not interested. A few minutes later, Xian and Zif walked down from the 2nd floor and Xian had changed into comfortable pajamas. It was only 5 o'clock and there were no outsiders in the restaurant, so they walked around casually. About 10 minutes later, Zhang Han put the 3 trays of steamed stuffed buns in the plates and directly set them on the tea table in front of them. Then, He also brought chili oil, soy sauce and vinegar. After the two of them made dipping condiments in the sauces, Zhang Han brought over the tableware 2 glasses of milk, 2 boiled eggs and rice porridge. Then, he sat next to Xian. "What a hearty breakfast, thank you, brother-in-law," Zif said happily and directly picked up a meat-stuffed bun with her chopsticks. She bit off a small piece of its outer layer and then the meat stuffing inside was exposed. Some heat rose from it, accompanied by the meat's fragrance. "It smells great." Zif was intoxicated and murmured, "After working overnight, it was really a pleasure to have such delicious food in the morning." She dipped the bun, which had lost a small piece of its layer, twice in the dipping condiments, then directly put the whole small bun into her mouth. That made her mouth bulge. She had first sensed the aroma of the white flour, but after the bite, the meat's pure fragrance and tenderness made Zif almost bite her tongue. "Wow, it's delicious, I like it," Zif chewed while muttering. After eating one, she quickly picked up the next one, bit off a little piece of the layer, dipped in the condiment, and then ate the whole bun in one bite. She did that repeatedly, enjoying her breakfast immensely. Xian was much more elegant than her. Although she was hungry, it wasn't to the degree of being able to eat like a horse. After biting off a little bit of the layering and dipping the bun in the condiment, she bit off a third of it, dipped it in the condiment, and then put it to Zhang Han's mouth, muttering, "Have some, too. You go ahead, I'll eat with Meng Meng later." Zhang Han shook his head slightly. Zhang Han thought earlier that the buns would be enough for them, but seeing that Zif was eating like that, he felt a little uncertain. He had a feeling that they might eat up all the 3 trays of buns. "Eat." Xian pouted her mouth while speaking. Zhang Han smiled and ate the small bun directly. Just like that, Zif focused on eating, while Xian and Zhang Han were eating together. Xian sometimes fed him half a bun and a bit of rice porridge, then at times some milk and half an egg. They were so sweet that Zif felt there was strong love around her. She didn't even want to raise her head to look at them. Soon, all the food was finished. After that, Zif lazily leaned on the sofa. She burped and said, "Oh my, it's great. I don't want to move. I get sleepy when I'm full. How about you sleep in the secondary bedroom upstairs?" Xian proposed. "Okay, then I'll do just that." Zif didn't refuse. She nodded directly and then went to the second floor. She probably wouldn't get up until the afternoon. They still needed to go out at 3 o'clock, so she wouldn't go back home to rest. In addition, she was really so sleepy at the moment that she could fall asleep even with a single pillow. Zif went upstairs. Zhang Han cleaned up the tableware and then held Xian's hands, saying, "Let's go upstairs, too. I'll give you a massage." They went back to the bedroom and Xian lay on the bed. Zhang Han thought for a moment and then lifted Xian's pajamas. In fact, he could also massage through the clothes. However, he wanted her to get used to it from the beginning. Zhang Han smiled and then started the massage with his palms gently. In just a few minutes, Xian fell asleep. She had muttered just before that, "It's comfortable." After another minute, seeing that Xian had fallen asleep, Zhang Han put her pajamas down and covered her with the quilt. Then, he went to sit in the chair next to him and played with the phone casually. It was 6:40. "Papa, Mama, I want to pee." Meng Meng woke up and called, "I'm coming." Zhang Han quickly put down his mobile phone, walked over and held Meng Meng in his arms while heading to the bathroom. He also helped Meng Meng wash up. After washing her face, the little girl became energetic. "Papa, why didn't Mama get up yet? Let's wake her up, the sun is high up there." Meng Meng waved her small hands and urged, "Your mommy didn't sleep well last night and needs to have a good rest." Zhang Han smiled and pinched Meng Meng's cute face with his hand, saying, "Let's go downstairs. You can watch cartoons for a while and I'll cook for you. We'll eat small stuffed buns today." "Oh, won't we wake up Mama?" Meng Meng blinked her big bright eyes while asking. She loved waking up her Mama. After thinking for a moment, she nodded her head and said, "All right, Let's go downstairs to watch cartoons. Let's go. Zhang Han held Meng Meng in his arms. Although Meng Meng was able to run and jump at the moment, Zhang Han still liked to hold the little girl in his arms, and she also liked to be held by Papa. She enjoyed being close to him. I finally found Papa. I can't let him go. Let's go. Meng Meng muttered. They went downstairs and sat on the sofa. When Zhang Han turned on the TV and found there was no Boonie Bears, Meng Meng muttered, "How come?" It was another cartoon. The little girl watched for 2 minutes and began to like it. Zhang Han went to the kitchen and swiftly made the stuffed buns. He needed to get them steamed after making a few trays, and a total of more than 20 trays were steamed in the end. Zhang Han laid half a tray of buns, a glass of milk, an egg and half a bowl of rice porridge on the tea table and started to feed Meng Meng breakfast. 4 VIP members had arrived at the moment. They were Wang and Wu Liang, as well as Pearson, who would go there for all the 3 meals in a day as long as he was in Hong Kong. Pearson had a good shape and was 1.8 meters tall, with a regular schedule. He also liked fitness, so his body was rather healthy. The last one was Lynx, who was seldom seen in the morning. The VIP members were quite surprised by having steamed stuffed buns for dinner, while the ordinary clients were even more excited, including the manager and several employees of the Sichuan restaurant next door. The early bird catches the worm. Those words did make some sense. At about 8:40 after breakfast time, the restaurant quietened. Zhang Han was accompanying Meng Meng to play with the remote control car on the sofa. Suddenly, a long version of the Rolls-Royce Phantom stopped at the parking space in front of the restaurant. Zhang Han noticed that event and then fixed his eyes on it. A thin man of more than 50 years old and a graceful-looking woman got off the car. It was a middle-aged man who opened the door for them. After looking carefully, Zhang Han remembered that when he went to Mount Yunding last time, the 3 of them were also there. Although they were sitting in the corner, there were very few people in there, and it had only been a few days, so Zhang Han recognized them soon. After exiting the car, they walked toward the door of the restaurant. Before they walked in, Hong Kitao also straightened his tie. He informal attire that day, in a light blue suit with a tie. Tang Jie was wearing a black dress, with a food bag in her hand, which contained 2 bottles of the most expensive treasured liquor in their house. With a smile on his face, Hong Kitao pushed the door and walked in. Then, he looked at the environment inside and went straight to the sofa. Meng Meng also stopped controlling her small sports car and put down the remote control in her hand. She turned her little head and looked at those people with curiosity. "Hello, Mr. Zhang." Hong Kitao stretched out his hand and said with a smile, "I'm Hong Kitao, I came here uninvited, please don't mind." Zhang Han ignored Hong Kitao's hand and looked at him coldly, asking, "What's the matter?" Hong Kitao was stunned and then withdrew his hand silently, thinking about what to say. "Mr. Zhang, these are 2 bottles of our treasured liquor, we brought them especially for you." Tang Jie interrupted them and gently placed the food bag in her hand on the tea table. When she saw Meng Meng, her eyes lit up and she said with a smile, "What a beautiful little girl." "Oh." Meng Meng was a little shy, so she muttered and hid behind Zhang Han, peeping at Tang Jie with her big bright eyes. Zhang Han took a look at Tang Jie and then looked at the respectful martial artist behind her. Finally, he fixed his eyes on Hong Kitao and asked calmly, "Tell me your intentions directly." Since they brought the liquor, Zhang Han gave them a chance to speak. Under normal circumstances, if someone was that indifferent to him without saying hello, Hong Kitao would have left immediately. But at the moment, the thought didn't come to his mind. The calmer Zhang Han appeared. The more he felt that he was a great master. After hearing Zhang Han's words, he thought for a second and then said slowly, "This is the case, Mr. Zhang. After you left Mount Yunding that day, Gequan simply treated Jiang Zongyao and the others. Later, before he left, he said that he'd make you pay 100 times more. He has a good relationship with Jiang Zongyao and the other people." After that, he looked at Zhang Han, trying to figure about what he was thinking from the expression in his eyes. For example, if he was afraid of Xuanhuan, he would roll his eyes and think of how to deal with him. If he wasn't afraid, it was possible that there would be fierceness in his eyes or his face darkened. However, Hong Qitao found that Mr. Zhang remained so composed that there was nothing strange in his eyes after he said that. That made Hong Qitao somewhat confused. However, Zhang Han still answered him. He stared at Hong Qitao and said, "Oh, you can leave now." If they had just gone there to tell him that, Zhang Han had no interest at all. From some details before they entered the door, he had found that they had gone there to ask for something. Zhang Han felt that he would probably not help them, but whether he would or not, he didn't like wasting time on guessing what they were thinking about. They could just tell him directly what they wanted. When Zhang Han said that, Hong Qitao was stunned. Tang Jie, who was next to him, thought for a moment and said bluntly, "Mr. Zhang, what he just said is totally true. Here's the thing, Xuanhuan has a grudge against us. He said that in a few days, my son and his girlfriend have to go to his house to beg for forgiveness for 3 days. That has to be a trap. We won't yield. We've used our connections, but to no avail. We were very helpless. Later, we thought of you, Mr. Zhang, so we came here to ask you today. Xuanhuan said that he'll deal with you, so I suggest you take the initiative to attack. It may also help us a lot. At that time, we'll surely show our gratitude and give you a satisfactory payment." In just a few words, she had felt that Mr. Zhang didn't like talking nonsense, so she simply told him their intentions directly. Whether he would agree or not was all in God's hands. After hearing those words, Zhang Han slightly narrowed his eyes and said, "Are you finished?" "Yes, I'm finished." Tang Jie nodded and replied, "Mr. Zhang, if you're interested, I'll make it more specific." "Oh, I'm not interested, please leave." Zhang Han waved his hand casually. If Xuanhuan didn't go there to provoke him, then he'd forget it, but if he did, Zhang Han would surely fight him. He wouldn't bother taking the initiative to go there. If he had the time, he might do it. However, he liked to accompany Meng and Xian at present, and doing other things would be a waste of time. After hearing his words, Tang Jie rolled her eyes helplessly. Given Mr. Zhang's attitude, I'm afraid that we'll fail today. Then, Hong Qitao sighed and shook his head while saying, "That's all right, Master Zhang." At the moment, the peak strength warrior behind them opened his mouth and said, "You may not know Master Ge very well. He's narrow-minded and vengeful. Since he said he'd make you pay in front of everyone, he'll definitely do that. He didn't fix the date, because he has just reached the Heave stage and hasn't fully mastered the power, I guess. A few days ago, I heard that he went back to practice after he left. I'm afraid that he'll come to you after he finishes that. You may not be afraid, but you have such a lovely daughter. You must know that man doesn't show any mercy to women or kids." As soon as he said that, Hong Qitao and Tang Jie looked at Zhang Han again. They hoped that he could agree. "He's just Xuanhuan. If he dares to come, I'll deal with him." Zhang Han thought about it and finally shook his head. His going to kill Xuanhuan and the latter's trying to kill him were two different things. If Xuanhuan arrived to cause trouble and was killed, nobody would say anything. However, if he went to kill Xuanhuan, he might have a lot of trouble. Xuanhuan must have his own forces of martial artists. If there was someone who was stronger than him, Zhang Han felt that it would be very troublesome. Even if there wasn't, if Xuanhuan's friends caused trouble and fought with him from time to time, it would be annoying, too. Zhang Han just wanted to live a peaceful life far away from those things. It was also because he was not so powerful at present. If he had a level of strength at the foundation stage when he went to Mount Yunding last time, Jiang Zongyao and the others, including Xuanhuan, would have already been killed. Although Zhang Han was strong, having gone through a tribulation and had great ambitions, it didn't mean that he should be arrogant. It was a solid fact that he was just in the early qi refining stage, so he had to worry about some things anyways. Otherwise, his opponents wouldn't just be injured if he fought them. After thinking about it, Zhang Han finally shook his head and refused. Well, then forget about what we said today. There's still a long way to go. I hope we can be friends, Mr. Zhang. Hong Kitao nodded and said that before turning to leave. Just after he took 2 steps, suddenly, a pleasing voice was heard from upstairs. Zhang Han, I'm coming. Zhang Han directly held Meng Meng in his arms and turned to the 2nd floor. Hong Kitao and Tang Jie suddenly stopped. They looked at each other. This voice, why is it so familiar? Sounds like Xiao Yan's voice. Tang Jie looked at Hong Kitao and said in doubt, it's really like her voice. Can that be her? Hong Kitao thought about it and said, how about we go upstairs and have a look? Xian's voice was very sweet and special. The voice coming from the 2nd floor had a close similarity to hers, but Hong Kitao wasn't sure, so he said that hesitantly. Don't be like this, the martial artist hurriedly reminded him. We don't know Mr. Zhang's temper. If we suddenly go there and invade their private space, he might be angry. You're right, Hong Kitao sighed and then said, let's go. He still needed to figure out what to do. He had also thought about trying to find a master from the mainland who was stronger than Gequan Long. Then, they left the restaurant. They wouldn't have known that by going upstairs to take a look out of impulse and confirm that it was Xian, they would have instantly been treated differently. It was just that they didn't dare to gamble, because there were many similar voices in this world. In addition, they thought that Xian was still single, therefore, they dropped the idea after thinking about it. Sometimes, they just missed some people or something that way. They were so close to have met each other, but they just missed the chance. At that time, at the door of the master bedroom on the 2nd floor, seeing that Zhang Han and Meng Meng were approaching her, the sleepy Xian squinted her eyes and muttered, I want to sleep with you. Mama, give me a hug. Meng Meng stretched out her little arms. After Xian held her in her arms, Meng Meng blinked her big eyes while saying, Mama, the sun is high up there. Mama will play with you after sleeping for a while. Xian kissed her cute face. All right. Meng Meng replied obediently. Come here. Xian opened the door of the bedroom and urged Zhang Han. I'm coming. Zhang Han took a few toys from the sofa and then went to the bedroom with Xian. All the curtains in the bedroom were drawn, so it was dark inside. Xian held Meng Meng on the bed. It's time to tell the story. Meng Meng snuck into the quilt and muttered, No, I only tell stories at night. Zhang Han couldn't help but laugh. He took off his coat and pants quickly before going to bed. Then, he put Meng Meng on his left side, to have her in the middle and put a few toys in front of her, whispering, Let's play with toys. Let's play with toys. Keep it down. Mama is still sleeping, Zhang Han whispered. Quite. Meng Meng lowered her voice and said quietly, Don't let Mama hear us. Hearing the little girl's words, a smile appeared on the corners of Xian's mouth. Although she closed her eyes, she was still very happy. After Zhang Han lay down, she leaned over, putting her long legs on one of his legs and one arm on his chest. Then, she gradually fell asleep. Zhang Han hugged Xian while quietly playing with Meng Meng. After about half an hour, the little girl felt bored and wanted to go out, so, Zhang Han gently went out of bed and tucked Xian in. Then, he put on his clothes and walked out quietly. Xian and Zif got up after 1 o'clock. Just after they woke up, Zhang Han prepared steaks for them, all medium done. They went to work after the meal. Just when they drove to the main road, those 3 Mercedes-Benzes followed up. They were still Leng and the other bodyguards. They returned to the company in the morning, took a break, made up for missed lessons, and then went to wait there after lunch. After arriving at the place Teacher Ma said earlier, all people got off the cars. Xian said to Leng that they could just wait for them in the restaurant later on. Hearing such caring words, Leng and the others felt very warm. They felt that Xian didn't just take them as bodyguards. Hong Kong was not very big. They needed to shoot at many places in 3 days and the shooting of MVs was very complicated, so there were a lot of tasks. Sometimes, one MV could involve nearly a month of work and some could be finished in 1 or 2 weeks. Of course, a simple one could only be finished in a day or two. As for Xian's 10 songs, it would take them nearly 20 days with the professional planning of teacher Ma, if they could work faster. Moreover, a lot of manpower and material resources needed to be used. If there were fewer staff, it would be delayed a lot. Fortunately, the company had provided sufficient human resources. After working for 3 consecutive days, they finished the shooting in Hong Kong. In the past few days, the 6 songs released by Xian had been a real hit. Just by opening a music app randomly, people would find that there were more than 200,000 comments under her songs. That was how new songs should be, which should immediately attract people's attention. Any other artists who had seen that envied Xian. When Han Yang was in his prime, she was lucky enough to get his 10 songs, which was just like winning a lottery. Conformity psychology made all people think Han Yang's songs were great when some people said so. On the 4th day, at 10 o'clock in the morning, in the conference room of the Royal Entertainment Company, Maki, Xian and Zuf were sitting in the main position while a press conference was in progress. Looking at nearly 100 media reporters down there, as well as the familiar yet strange flashes, Xian had mixed feelings. It seemed that the album would be 100% successful, which meant that her comeback was already in sight. Xian, how did you get the 10 songs from Han Yang? It's well known that before Han Yang gives his songs, he'd always reply on Weibo, but you didn't seem to have experienced that. Did you know him from before? Facing all the media, Xian answered their questions smoothly and was quite experienced. About an hour later, the press conference ended and the scheduled release time was October 15th, in about 20 days. After she finished that part, she could rest until the afternoon of the next day. However, after the press conference, Maki answered a phone call. When Xian was about to leave, she hurriedly stopped her and said, "Xian, wait, Boss Wu wants to see you, he has something to tell you." "Oh, okay." Xian nodded and then went to Wu Chengdong's office with Zif. They knocked on the door and then entered the office. Wu Chengdong was very friendly that time. He waved his hand and said with a smile, "Sit." Xian and Zuf nodded and sat on the sofa. "You'll go to the mainland tomorrow afternoon. There will be a party that evening and you'd better go there," Wu Chengdong said directly. "But I have something to do at night," Xian replied. "Don't refuse me so soon." Wu Chengdong smiled and said, "It'll be a gathering of the upper-class entertainment circle. Several people in our company have the chance. I'll also go there with some senior executives. The party will be held by Gafang, the chairman of Nangxin Entertainment. He especially called to invite me, saying that he has several scripts in hand, each with an investment of more than 50 million and some with 100 or 200 million. He wants to cooperate with our Royal Entertainment. Therefore, I intend to bring a few artists over there. I think this is an opportunity and you should go to have a look. It won't be very long, it'll only take an hour or two." "Oh, yes, Mr. Gu also mentioned you. He said that he's heard about your album recently. He also thought that you're suitable to play the heroine in several scripts. I guess you can pick the script you like later. Mr. Gu will throw this party mainly for his wife's birthday. In addition, you'll come with us, so there's no need to worry about your safety." Wu Chengdong explained the whole thing to her in a concise manner. After hearing his words, Xian was lost in thought. If it's really like what he said, it will be a good opportunity. It'd be fine to spend an hour or two there. After thinking about it, Xian nodded and said, "At what time?" "At 8 o'clock, at the Dragon Triumph Club in the Jianshaw district," Wu Chengdong replied. "Okay, we'll get there on time." Chapter 355, Dragon Triumph Club. Xian directly nodded and promised. Although she made a comeback as a singer, she still wanted to develop toward film and television industry in the future. What Wu Chengdong said was indeed an opportunity. Even Wu Chengdong thought like that. Although he had some influence, he didn't belong to the top-level society. He also didn't know that the gathering wouldn't be that simple. After receiving Xian's reply, Wu Chengdong nodded with a smile and said, "I've been following the songs you've released recently, they've responded favorably. I predict that your new album may go platinum on the first day." "Great. I'm flattered, Boss Wu." Xian nodded slightly and answered, "Ha ha ha." Wu Chengdong shook his head while laughing and then said, "Go back to have some rest, don't be late." "Yes." After responding, Xian got up and left with Zif. After they left, Wu Chengdong shook his head slightly. He felt regretful because he had misjudged earlier. Given Xian's ability, she'd soon become the backbone of Royal Entertainment Company. However, he had helped Limji last time, resulting in a bad relationship with her. He noticed that Xian wasn't very dependent on the company at the moment. He also felt that if there was a chance, Xian would probably choose to leave. However, no one could predict the future. What he could do was to wait and see. Wu Chengdong sighed. After Xian walked out of the door, Leng and the others followed her and went downstairs. The 6 of them were Xian's personal guards, who would follow her wherever she went. At first, people in the company were very surprised when they saw Leng and the others, but they got used to that after seeing them a few times. They walked all the way downstairs, and then got in the cars to head back to New Moon Bay. At the same time, at Meng Meng's recreational restaurant, a man in a black suit with a serious face had just walked to Zhang Han. He made a military salute and then said, "General Zhang, what is it?" Just after hearing that, Zhang Han remembered that he still had the title of a general. That was a very high status in ordinary people's eyes, but Zhang Han had almost forgot about it. He never cared about titles, and he knew that he had gotten that title because someone wanted to make use of his ability to make martial artists in batches. They must have also noticed Mount New Moon, but didn't know where the yanking water that could enhance the physical fitness came from. Since they had received the first batch, they definitely want the second batch. It was addictive, too. However, the reserve of yanking water had been reduced by half and it couldn't support a consumption in bulk. Even if it was used to improve the livestock's physique on the mountain, it would possibly only last for about a year. Therefore, when he saw that somebody had arrived and even called him General Zhang, he decided to talk with him officially. "Leading Cardinal, you sent me to tell you that no one will ask about Tangzan again. The injured people on Mount Yunding have also been warned and they won't disturb you in the future, General Zhang," that man said loudly. "Oh, nothing else?" Zhang Han asked with a chuckle. "Yes." The man answered very bluntly. Zhang Han felt that it was a little funny. He also liked talking in such a simple way, so he nodded and said, "Go ahead. We want to incorporate Zhao Feng and his security members into Wolfhead as the second detachment. It'll be a cooperative relationship. General Zhang, do you agree?" The man said bluntly, "Well." Zhang Han thought for a while and then shook his head, saying, "Go and contact Xiao Feng, he'll make the decision." Incorporating them into Wolfhead would just be in name. A cooperative relationship meant that those people should be able to help them when there were tasks. Zhang Han wasn't interested in such things and didn't want to get involved, so he decided to leave it to Zhao Feng. He believed that Zhao Feng could make the right decision. "Yes." The man responded and made a salute before turning to leave neatly. 10 minutes after he left, Xian and Zuf returned. "Mama, what's that?" Meng Meng suddenly noticed the food box in Xian's hand. "It looks like an ice cream." The little girl was surprised. She stood up on the sofa and stretched out her arms to ask for Xian's hug. Then, Xian held her in her arms and said with a smile, "Look at what it is. Ice cream." Meng Meng said very happily, "You want it?" "Yes, yes." "Then kiss me first." Xian put her red lips forward. Mew, mew, mew. After the kisses, Xian put Meng Meng on the sofa and muttered, "You're getting heavier and heavier. I won't be able to carry you later on. Here you are." While speaking, she handed the ice cream over and then Meng Meng began to eat it happily. "Come, sit." Zhang Han looked at Xian with a chuckle and patted the place next to him. After Xian sat down, he held her hands and smiled, saying, "You'll be free till tomorrow afternoon, right?" The implication was, "Shouldn't you spend some private time with me?" After hearing the words, Xian licked her mouth and rolled her eyes to him, thinking, "You're always thinking about those things." However, his words also made her feel very hot, since she had longed for that for a long time. Once thinking of what they would do, Xian felt her whole body become a little numb. She didn't know what to do, like a flustered small rabbit. "I have to go to a party in the evening, we might talk about the scripts in the future," Xian replied. "Brother-in-law, Xian is going to be a superstar. After the album gets popular, I guess money will flow into her wallet non-stop," Zif said happily. "Oh, when is that?" Zhang Han asked casually. "It will start at 8 o'clock, so we'll set off at about 7:20, Xian answered. Then, she thought for a moment and said, "I'm free in the afternoon. I want to have fun in the yacht and go surfing." Ever since they went surfing on the huge waves last time, Xian would recall that day from time to time. The overwhelming huge waves were so exciting. Also, the water curtain formed after the waves was so beautiful. She could hear the sound of the running water and touch it once by stretching out her hand. That was indeed a wonderful experience. Zhang Han naturally wouldn't refuse Xian's request, so he nodded directly. After Meng Meng heard it, her big eyes lit up and she also voiced her excitement about going surfing. Therefore, the group of people went out. Leng and the others were still in the cars outside and followed up once they set off. After arriving at Deepwater Bay Yacht Club, they rented a yacht and everyone got on. Leng and the other bodyguards didn't wear swimsuits, so they sat on the lower deck. Zhang Han, Xian, Meng Meng and Zif were on the upper floor in swimsuits. Meng Meng played happily with those small toys. When they decided to go surfing, Xian was a little worried, so she didn't allow Meng Meng to do that. Instead, Zhang Han held her in his arms and surfed several times. Zif got envious after seeing their intimate acts. She also wanted to surf in another man's arms, but the man had not appeared yet. They didn't spend a long time there. At 5 o'clock, everyone went back home. Zhang Han made dinner. At dinner time, the 6 women, including Leng, were also invited to the restaurant by Xian and they ate at the dining table near the piano on the first floor. After the meal, Xian and Zuf went to the bedroom and stayed there for a long time. After they came out, they already had a bright, new look. "You're gorgeous." Zhang Han looked at Xian, with amazement in his eyes, while praising her. Xian was wearing a beige Chanel dress. There was a little tulle around the neck, which could reveal her eye-catching clavicles. The dress was to the knee and people could see her delicate and slender legs. She didn't wear high heels, since she was already very tall. Instead, she was wearing a pair of crystal sandals. With her hair worn in a bun, her neck appeared more slender. She was also wearing earrings and the jade bracelet Zhang Han bought for her, holding a Hermes black handbag. She looked elegant and beautiful. Zif was also dressed up, wearing a red gown. However, Xian was too attractive and she'd be overlooked. "How is it?" With the bag in her left hand and lifting the dress a little with her right hand, Xian turned around in front of Zhang Han. Then, she gracefully fell in Zhang Han's arms with her own arms around his neck, asking, "Am I beautiful?" "Wow, Mama is super beautiful." Meng Meng praised her on the sofa. "Yes, you're gorgeous." Zhang Han praised her softly. "Meow." Xian raised her head and kissed him gently on his lips, saying, "I'm leaving." "Oh my goodness, I'm still here." Zif patted her forehead heavily. "I really can't stand it." Xian rolled her eyes to her. There were customers downstairs, so they put on the sunglasses and then went to their destination under everyone's attention. Zif didn't drive, since she was wearing high heels. They got in the Mercedes-Benz driven by Leng and then the 3 cars drove to the Dragon Triumph Club in the Jianshan district. The Dragon Triumph Club was a private club, which would only receive the upper class in Hong Kong. Many parties or activities were held there. Located in the south of the Jianshan district, it was very large. like a mountain villa. The scenery and decoration were great, and there were artificial hills, lakes and pavilions everywhere. There was also an entertainment building, hot springs, several special gathering halls, etc. It was a private club with integrated amenities. At 7:45 a lot of people had already arrived, including Wu Chengdong, Meiki, Director Fu and another senior executive. They didn't come together, but they had all arrived a quarter of an hour earlier. Those who didn't have high status usually arrived at the place in advance. Only the real big shots would appear at the last moment, and nobody would dare to criticize them even if they were late. After Meiki arrived, she happened to meet Xuanhuan, her agent and a female employee from another company at the entrance of the club. "Why are you here?" Meiki asked curiously. "System, Mr. Li invited us to come," Xuanhuan said with a smile. When she passed the parking lot, a lot of luxury cars made her feel a little nervous. She knew that it was a gathering of high-ranking people held by Gu Pengfing's father. She had an in-depth understanding of Gu Pengfing and naturally knew how powerful he was. It was no exaggeration to say that if Xuanhuan could get Gu Pengfing's support, she'd immediately dump Li Cheng. She didn't want to work with Li Cheng deep inside, but she had to pretend to be compliant for the time being. "Oh, let's go together." Meiki smiled and then took the lead as they walked into the building. Chapter 356. Can I get her? Judging from its gate, it was a hotel, opening to the public. They entered from the inner door of the hotel and passed by a 5-story building on the side, then saw a hotel named Full Moon Pavilion, accommodating the members of the club, in which every room was well decorated. The club was overgrown with luxuriant clusters of trees, and there were various flowers and trees on both sides of the road. After a few minutes, they had arrived at their destination, Banlong Hall. Banlong Hall was the best assembly hall of the Dragon Triumph Club. Only the relatively high level was decorated in a retro style, seeming like a palace. On the 4 intersecting lines of the tiles on the roof were furnished with 4 gold dragons, hovering downwards, with their 4 large dragon heads at the edges, which looked magnificent. The lamps in the hall were so brilliant, lightening the surrounding areas. Not only the environment, but also the decoration showed the meaning of luxury. "How magnificent this is!" Xuanhuan's agent whispered. It was the first time that she had been on such occasion. "That's okay, we'll attend such gatherings more and more often in the future." Xuanhuan slightly raised her chin. She and Meiki walked into the hall, in which many sofas were placed, along with plenty of rectangular tables in front of the sofas, with a lot of snacks on them. The waiters in suits were carrying wine trays, carrying glasses of red wine. Although they seemed to be of high quality, they were actually of an average kind. The decoration inside the hall was more luxurious, including the sofas and furniture. A small number of people were lounging on the sofas and chatting with each other. More people were standing in the middle of the hall, talking with others while holding a wine glass. A professional was playing the piano nearby, and the melodious sound of the piano made the atmosphere very pleasant. Meiki directly looked inside a few times. After finding that Wu Chengdong was sitting in the head seat inside, she walked over. "Child Li is there." Xuanhuan's agent pointed to the corner at the front left side, seeing Li Cheng was talking with Gu Pengfing and some other men with a smile. "Let's go over to greet them," Xuanhuan said, then took the lead to walk over. At that moment, Li Cheng and 5 other men having a chat. "Are you sure Xian will come here?" Gu Pengfing asked Li Cheng. Li Cheng's eyes were still bruised. After hearing Gu Pengfing's words, he nodded and said, "I've asked her and she promised to come. Maybe she'll arrive soon." "Great." Gu Pengfing's eyes lit up, speaking excitedly. "Hey, it seems that Brother Feng is confident to get her, is that so?" The yellow-haired youth asked with a smile. "Of course, as long as she dares to show up, I dare to take action." Gu Pengfing replied with a solemn expression. What he said shocked everyone else around. Li Cheng asked in doubt, "Do you want to snatch her, Brother Feng? Today's party is so grand, so I think that's not a good idea." If they clashed with each other, he thought that Gepengfing would not be able not settle things down. How could his father, Wu Chengdong and some other powerful big shots allow him to snatch Xian since they were still on the stage? You talk nonsense. How can I snatch her in front of them? I'm not stupid. Gepengfing glared at him. Then he took a small bag from the inside pocket of his suit as his eyes narrowed. The stuff inside the bag was like flour. He said proudly, I prepared this. My gosh, 666. The yellow-haired man's eyes widened. It turned out to be this thing? Huh. Li Cheng swallowed and said, will it work? What would you do if you make a ruckus? Xian is accompanied by several powerful bodyguards. The bodyguards aren't allowed to come in, and I made thorough preparations. Gepengfing snorted and said, besides, I look down on ordinary bodyguards. My uncle and a few of his friends will come here today. They're real big shots. As long as my uncle is here, he can solve any problems even if I make trouble. Your father is sitting on the stage. The man with yellow hair pouted his lips to the head seats inside. What he meant was that his father would probably disagree even if his uncle was there. If that thing were to be spread around, it would bring discredit on their reputation. I told my father, otherwise I wouldn't have prepared thoroughly. It is not a big deal. Gepengfing put the small bag back into his clothes, then waved his hand and said, he is in a good mood today and told me that my uncle will bring even more powerful friends. Moreover, I can do whatever I want to as long as I make sure nobody dies, and he will solve all the problems. In fact, I can get those unknown stars if I threaten them. Brother Feng is so awesome. The yellow-haired man's eyes brightened, and he also felt relieved. He clapped and said, Xian is undoubtedly a beauty. Brother Feng, don't you let us. Get out, number. I just want to enjoy myself. Gepengfing curled his lips and said, if I can get her later, you won't have the opportunity until I get tired of her. Stop thinking about her. I will call you when Ninai comes over in a few days. Okay. The man with yellow hair nodded with a smile. Hey, you can have a try if you are interested in that girl. Gepengfing suddenly looked forward. Who? The yellow-haired man and some other men turned and looked over, then saw Xuanhuan and two of her companions. The other two women were ordinary looking, while Xuanhuan was gorgeously dressed. She especially wore a deep V-neck gown, which added to her sensuality. Is she Li Cheng's person? Gepengfing said. Yes, I asked them to come here. If you are interested in her, I will introduce her to you later, and then she can stay here at night, Li Cheng said with a smile. Okay. The yellow-haired man's eyes narrowed, and he was in high spirits at that time. As they talked with each other, Xuanhuan and her two companions approached. Xuanhuan smiled sweetly and said in an affected tone, hello, child Li, child Gu and all of you childs. Hello, come and sit here. The man with yellow hair waved his hand casually. After Xuanhuan sat down, the yellow-haired man put his arm around her shoulder, intending to probe her attitude. To his surprise, she was really unperturbed, as if she were used to this. At that point, the yellow-haired man knew that he could surely get her. Therefore, he asked with a smile, what's your name? My name is Xuanhuan. Oh, it's really a good name. My name is Dachou. The group of people started to chat with each other, although Xuanhuan and her companions joined their conversation. Gepengfing and the others did not say anything. To Xuanhuan's surprise, Gepengfing seemed to show no interest in her and didn't even greet her. Didn't she look sexy that day? The chat carried a color of conspiracy. The atmosphere in other places was much better. Many people were chatting with great enthusiasm. Entertainers were getting together in groups, and their topics went along these lines. Are you planning to release a new album soon? I heard that you got the heroine role of a movie. Bosca has won several scripts recently and many of us have a chance to get a role. There were also a lot of bosses who went there for the sake of Gefang, at the moment. They were also chatting with each other in the hall. Arkying, how's your company's recent benefit? I heard that you're intending to develop a good project. Boss Liu, do you want to change trading partners in Macau? I think we can cooperate. All in all, the atmosphere of the hall was in high spirits, but that was just the beginning. At that time, the head seats inside were made up of a row of golden sofas. Gufang and the other masters were sitting on them, and their female companions were dressed in bright and cheery colors. He was already over 50 years old, but his lady was less than 30. Besides, he and his wife had been living apart since a few years ago. Although they had not divorced, their marriage had been on the rocks. Beside Gufang and his lover, plenty of his partners were seated, who were all of a high status. Of course, some girls, as his lover's friends, were also sitting there and chatting with each other. There were about 15 or 16 people in total. Wu Chengdong and Meiki were sitting in the corner. By right of Wu Chengdong's identity, he was qualified to sit there. But Meiki wasn't. Brother Gu, I heard that you planned to shoot a movie with nearly 300 million yuan budget recently. A middle-aged person, who was sitting not far from Gufang, asked with a smile. Laymen might regard a movie with a budget of nearly 100 million yuan as a big-budget production. After all, film and television works with low investment abounded. However, in the country's view, a film with an investment of 100 or 200 million yuan could not be counted as a big-budget production. Take Hollywood for instance. It was not only the birthplace of global fashion, but also the center of the global music and film industry. It possessed the world's top entertainment industry and luxury brands, leading and representing the highest level of global fashion, like DreamWorks, Disney, Sony, Universal, Warner Brothers and other movie giants. In their view, only Hollywood could be regarded as the holy land of films, where fashion and technology were mutually constrained and developed. With profound fashion deposits and majestic technology, it was imitated by the whole world all the time. Those companies owned good movie series, and the budget of a movie could sometimes reach 1 or 2 billion yuan. Such works could be counted as big-budget productions. After hearing his words, Gufang nodded and said with a smile, "Yes, I got 2 relatively good scripts, which are recently being prepared. You should tell me in advance. Since you have good scripts, I can invest in them." The middle-aged man laughed and said, "Well, if you are interested, we can talk about it in detail," Gufang said with a smile. In general, a movie would have several producers, who were eager to gain investment shares if there was a good script. After all, it was a chance to share a piece of cake. Furthermore, more investors meant less risks. The resources of each company would speed up the filming, realizing a higher efficiency. That was also the reason why the company logos were to be showed for a few minutes before a movie truly started. Affirmed by Gufang, several people, including Wu Chengdong who was next to him, smiled with great satisfaction. The scripts, which could be discussed in public, were of good quality. After expanding on those scripts later with Gufang, he considered to participate. "Brother Gu, has Uncle Qianlong returned recently? I heard that he has reached a higher stage." Suddenly, the man on Gufang's right side, who was about the same age as him, said. Gufang smiled and said with a nod, "Yes, he did break through. Congratulations, Brother Gu, with Uncle Qianlong, you will certainly be successful." A hint of envy flashed across the man's eyes, then he saluted to Gufang and said with a smile. Others also rushed to congratulate him. "Brother Gu will definitely be promoted. With Master Gu, you will have meteoric rise easily." Most of people present not only knew some information about the martial artist, but also the meaning of Gu Qianlong's rise in cultivation. A heaven stage master. He was the real upper-level figure, who had various means and was extremely powerful. They were all really envious and made up their minds to foster a good relationship with Gufang. However, Meiki, who was sitting outermost, was totally confused. "Master Gu, what is a master?" She did not know what it meant as she seldom heard of it. "My elder brother will come over later, too. He just finished meditating in seclusion and wants to take a rest." Gufang shook his head and said, By the way, another big shot will come here later. Who is it? Everyone's eyes brightened and they asked in succession. He Yunfei. Under everyone's gaze, Gufang calmly said that name. The instant he finished speaking, everyone's faces changed. A burst of exclamation was heard constantly. It turns out to be He Yunfei. Protector, he will come. Hiss, Brother Gu, I think you are bound to rise. My God, it will be the first time that I meet him in person if he comes over. Everyone sighed with emotion. Although they were all bosses, they were completely unappreciated and unqualified in front of people like Xuanhuan. When people reached a certain level, their strength would be very significant. Among the factors taking effect on their strength, the most important one was martial arts. Having plenty of money mattered, but holding on to it was more important. Only the people who owned great strength could achieve things. They all knew that Chairman Liu Qingfeng, who had won their respect, had not been promoted because of that restriction, let alone them. Although they were rich, they still had a long way to go if they wanted to develop further. Boss Wu. Seeing that Wu Chengdong's face also changed, Meiki, next to him, brought her head closer and asked in a low voice, who is He Yunfei? He. Wu Chengdong came to his senses as his eyes were filled with reverence and said, he's a real big shot. If we were soldiers, He Yunfei would be a general. Do you know this concept, Protector? He is much more powerful than Master Gu. How awesome. Meiki's facial muscles trembled. She wanted to ask him who Master Gu was, but she was too embarrassed to ask. In the meantime, she was really shocked by the comparison between the general and the soldiers, because the gap was simply too big. While everyone was chatting, the noises in the hall diminished all of a sudden. The atmosphere seemed to be contagious and the voices gradually became died down, starting from the door to deeper inside. In the end, only less than 10% of people talked with each other. That made many people feel a little weird. As they looked at the door, many men's eyes lit up, while a lot of women's eyes were suffused with envy. Under everyone's gaze, Xian, in a white dress, and Zuf, wearing a red dress, slowly walked into the hall. Xian dressed up amazingly, and even Gufang's lover was jealous of her, but she also admitted that she was a really beautiful lady. That beauty is Xian. Here is Xian. So beautiful. She looks prettier than in her photos. Some exclamations lingered around the hall. My gosh, she's so beautiful. Gu Pengfeng's eyes immediately narrowed and his heart tripled, filled with a long-lost tension and excitement, as if he had seen his first love. He was somewhat surprised at Xian's appearance in reality, as he had not expected her to be so beautiful. An exceedingly charming stunner. What an exceedingly charming stunner. I have only seen two beauties who are so charming in my life. The first one is a mixed-race beauty, who was married to an aristocratic son of the British royal family. I did not expect that this beauty would actually be as beautiful as her. A child next to Gu Pengfeng sighed with emotion. After finishing speaking, he looked at Gu Pengfeng again. There he thought for a while and said, the beauties like her are not easy to be harnessed, Pengfeng. Do you want to reconsider your plan? The man with a flat-top haircut was of a high status, although he was a low-key person, whose family was more powerful than the Gu family. He just sat there and never said anything. At that point, seeing Xian, he was not only surprised by her appearance, but also worried that she would be Helen of Troy. He was aware that there were a lot of beautiful women provoking various disputes. Those who wanted to pursue exceedingly charming beauties needed to figure out all their detailed information. However, for Gu Pengfeng, it was easy to get into trouble if he only wanted to get Xian by using tricks. But at the moment, Gu Pengfeng was so excited that he was deaf to his suggestion. He didn't even turn his head but said directly, Brother Hugh, I made up my mind. I don't want to miss this opportunity. All right. Brother Hugh nodded and did not say anything then. He planned to stay there a bit longer, since he could touch the core of his family. He knew a lot about martial arts. Although heaven stage masters seemed to be at a high level, some people still looked down on them. He remembered that he and several elders of his family visited the general manager of the National Security Agency of Hong Kong in the beginning of that year, and he was a Wu Dao Grand Master. He remembered that the general manager had said that Wu Dao Grand Masters were just at the initial stage. He did not even dare to claim that he was one of the top 10 powerful masters in Hong Kong. There was no denying that the martial arts world was very complicated. Those masters present were not very formidable, but most people were too ignorant to reach a higher stage. The horizon determined the height. Although he did not agree with Gu Pengfing since he planned to play tricks on Xian, he did not want to say anything more. He always listened more and talked less, pursuing the principle of being a low-key person. Everyone's admiration made Xuanhuan feel really jealous, and she just stared at Xian, who was surrounded and worshipped like a moon by all the men present. She was so angry and was confused, wondering why she had witnessed such a scene when she had showed up. Under everyone's gaze, Xian and Zuf slowly walked to the head seats. Leng and other bodyguards were all held back in the hotel lounge, for no bodyguards were allowed to enter the party. Soon, the two of them went to Gufang. Directum, Boss Wu. Xian greeted the people of her company first, then looked at Gufang and said while smiling, Boss Gu, happy birthday to Mrs. Gu. This is just a little token to show my respect to her. While speaking, she took a small gift box from her handbag and handed it over. Gufang's lover took it with a wide smile and thanked her. Just sit down, Xian. Gufang said and waved his hand, while his eyes narrowed. Okay. Xian acted naturally and gracefully. After glancing around, she finally sat on Wu Chengdong's side. She and Zif sat beside Maki. Beauties of Royal Entertainment Company does deserve her reputation. Gufang gasped in admiration and said, Boss Wu, I think the heroines of the movies I invested in recently are really suitable for Miss Z. Can I ask my subordinate to discuss our cooperation? Well, I'll wait for you at any time. Wu Chengdong's eyes slightly brightened. He thought he would realize a good performance. After hearing what he said, everyone present shook their heads and sighed with emotion. Some spoke highly of Xian's beautiful appearance, and some praised Wu Chengdong for achieving a good cooperation. Among them, Maki was also very excited. She looked at Xian beside her, thinking that Xian was likely to become famous soon. She was relatively sensitive. Judging by Gufang's gaze, she felt that he seemed to be interested in Xian. However, in her view, as long as she could succeed, it did not matter if she paid some price. She also had a complicated relationship with Li Cheng as a way to get the position of director. However, she did not know that Gufang was just excited by what his son, Gu Pengfing, was about to do. Why don't we have a drink first? The middle-aged man next to Gufang picked up a glass of red wine and said, Happy birthday to Mrs. Gu. Everyone picked up their wine glasses and took a sip together. The instant they finished drinking, 5 other people broke into the hall all of a sudden. Among them, Xuanhuan, Gufang's eldest brother, was the first person in the group. If others sized them up more carefully, they would find that the middle-aged man in his 40s, near Xuanhuan, was standing nearly 1 meter ahead of him. Even those who were not familiar with him knew that the person was the highly reputed Yanfei. The two of them walked forward, followed by 3 people, one of whom was Jiang Zongyao, who had been thoroughly beaten a few days ago, while the other 2 Earth Stage Masters were Xuanhuan's friends. When everyone approached, Gufang and the other masters all stood up. Many greeted them with great enthusiasm, although they were somewhat cautious. Hello, Master Gu. Hello, Protector He. It's my honor to invite Protector He to come over, Gufang said with a smile. Everyone stood up, including Xian and Zuf. Sometimes, they had to follow the general trend in some aspects, even if they did not know them and had never heard of them before. You would offend them if some remained seated while others stood up. You're welcome, sit down please. I am off duty today, therefore, I came here. Yanfei nodded and smiled. Everyone sat down once again, leaving all the head seats unoccupied, while Yanfei, Xuanhuan and 3 other masters, who were the most powerful men among the people present, sat in the center. At that time, Pengfing, who was playing on the other side with his friends, could not contain his excitement any longer, so he got up and walked over. As he approached them, he took out a gift box and said, "Happy birthday, stepmother." His gift gave rise to a burst of his stepmother's laughter. She still felt a bit awkward when she saw the eldest son, who was about the same age as her. "Protector he, let me introduce my son, Pengfing." "Pengfing, greet your uncle he," Fang said. "Hello, uncle he." Pengfing greeted him honestly. "You're welcome." Yanfei waved his hand casually. After Pengfing finished his greeting, he glanced around, then walked to Wu Chengdong and sat next to him. He picked up a glass of wine on the tea table and said, "Hello, Boss Wu, Xian." He greeted and raised his toast. Wu Chengdong, Maki, Xian and Zuf all raised their glasses and took a sip of red wine. During that period, Maki was a little depressed, feeling that she was completely unappreciated. Then, Pengfing stared at Xian's wine glass, looking at the remaining red wine. He was lost in thought. In another place, a group of people including He Yanfei were chatting casually. Seeing the people passing by him in succession, He Yanfei picked his glass up and took a sip of wine, then said with emotion, "It's been 3 years since I've participated in such a lively gathering." Although his cultivation was rising constantly, he felt that he had gone further away from those secular situations. "Since you like noisy environments, you can attend such parties later, brother he," Xuanhuan said with a smile. "There are some stars here, I will help you get whichever girl you like, brother he." "Oh?" He Yanfei glanced at him, he chuckled and glanced around, then he focused on Xian and said, "I think this lady is the most beautiful one present, can I get her?" If others had made such a claim, he would arouse Fang's lover's dissatisfaction. However, she did not dare to say anything because she thought everything he said was alright since he was a big shot. As soon as he finished his words, 3 people's faces immediately changed. 2 of them were Xian and Zuf. It was really rude for him to say that since Xian was there. Another one, whose face changed, was Pengfing. He was a little depressed. In fact, as long as He Yanfei asserted this claim, his plans for that night would be totally destroyed. At that point, he was in great anger and even wanted to curse him. However, he was indeed somewhat of a coward. He also knew that if he said it, his father and uncle were likely to break his legs, not to mention that He Yanfei would probably punish him. That is not true, is it? Pengfing looked at He Yanfei with tearless grief. Under everyone's gaze, Xuanhuan glanced at Xian and spat out 2 words faintly, "Of course." Chapter 357, Becoming Extremely Furious. Xuanhuan said in an extremely positive tone, as if he were giving his own things as a gift. His words were beyond any doubt and undeniable, leaving no room for rejection. The instant he finished speaking, the expressions of the people present varied. Fang was very startled and had not expected that outcome. At first, his lover felt shocked. Then she gloated and looked at Xian. Sometimes, it was a sin for people to be so beautiful. Some people just looked on passively, while some others were apparently helpless. They were aware that Xuanhuan and He Yanfei, on that occasion, totally ignored them. Pengfing was almost livid at that moment, failing to figure out what to make of things. At that point, he seemed to have trouble with constipation and was uncomfortable. Wu Chengdong and Maki were stunned, because neither of them had expected such a thing to happen. Therefore, they were quite upset. Wu Chengdong felt especially uneasy. He had promised Xian that he could keep her safe if she went there. But at the moment, he lowered his head slightly and did not even dare to look at Xian. Everything that happened was attributed to her bad luck. Wu Chengdong chose to ignore, pretending not to see or hear anything, as if he were irrelevant. Xian's expression also cooled down at that time. She just stared at He Yanfei, unblinking, and her eyes were filled with determination and unyieldingness. Zif's response was more dramatic. Although she knew that those people in front of her were very powerful, she could not hold her anger. She stood up and stared at them, panting like a cow. Feelings of certitude, Xuanhuan frowned. When he was about to scold her, Yanfei's laughter was heard. Everyone turned and looked over, seeing Yanfei shaking his head slightly and drinking up a glass of red wine. Then he said flatly, "I'm just kidding, don't take it seriously. Just a joke." Everyone was completely surprised and did not know what Yanfei meant. Even the most beautiful woman will turn into a fair skeleton in the end, just like this lady. Yanfei casually pointed at Zhan and said, "Though she is exceedingly pretty now, she will inevitably age after 10 or 20 years." At that point, Yanfei glanced at Xuanhuan, Zhang Han and several other people, then he said while shaking his head, "People of our generation are pursuing and committing themselves to martial arts. Once we are entangled in any mundane matters, we will find it hard to have breakthroughs. This is also the reason why martial artists are rare and are generally untalented." He spoke with a master's demeanor, which startled Xuanhuan and the others. Then they saluted to him and said with a smile, "Understood." If Zhang Han would have heard what he said, he would say that Yanfei was talking nonsense. All roads led to Rome. The means in the cultivation world varied from person to person. For instance, cultivators of the lust sect needed to cultivate with those whose gender was different from theirs. The reason why martial artists were rare was essentially ascribed to the depletion of the spiritual chi in heaven and earth. However, many people present felt relieved after hearing Yanfei's words. Zif twisted her mouth in anger and sat down, while Zhan was in a much worse mood, her cold look remaining. In fact, anyone would feel bad if others played jokes on them. Wu Chengdong and Megi dared to raise their heads at that point, while Gu Pengfing heaved a great sigh of relief. "Protector come on, I'm really honored since you came here. Let's propose a toast to you," Gu Fang properly interjected, and he said that as he picked up his wine glass. As soon as he moved, everyone present picked up their glasses. Even Zif and Zhan also took their wine glasses and took a small sip. Sometimes, those rules had to be observed. After finishing that glass of wine, everyone began to chat with each other casually, and most of them were flattering Protector He around him. Gu Pengfing proposed a toast to Wu Chengdong from time to time. "Come on, Boss Wu, Zhan, it's the first time that we have met each other. Zhan is very beautiful. I think she will become popular after shooting several films and television works. Respect the movie queen of the future with a glass of wine. Is this directum? Since you're Zhan's director, you will definitely reach a higher position in the future. I toast to you. Zhan was somewhat impatient with Gu Pengfing's toasts. Although she had just taken small sips of wine every time, she still drank up 3 glasses after a while. When Zhan decided to leave after a few minutes, Gu Fang's conversation with the others suddenly attracted her attention. "I heard that a powerful man showed up on Mount Yunding a few days ago," Yanfei said casually after taking a sip of wine. "That's right. The person is Master Zhang of New Moon Bay, with extraordinary skills," an Earth stage martial artist behind him replied. "He's indeed highly skilled and knocked down 5 masters, including Jiang Zongyao, though he has probably just reached the profound stage. Perhaps he has some secrets that can help his strength break out in an instant," Xuanhuan said with a nod. His words made Jiang Zongyao blush. As a Earth stage warrior, it was really shameful to be gravely injured by a person who had just entered the profound stage, and he had currently returned to the profound stage since the man hurt his root. Therefore, he was wallowing in hatred. After thinking for a while, Jiang Zongyao said in a low voice, "That person is particularly arrogant. He's just the owner of a restaurant, but he actually asked me to fight against a chimpanzee. He insulted me. He sneaked up on us as he found that the chimpanzee was no match for us. I told him twice that I wanted to recruit him to take part in the National Security Agency, but he totally looked down on us. Protector please help me today. My superiors now limit me, But how can I diffuse my anger since my strength declined? His words made everyone's eyes sparkle with curiosity. Who is Master Zhang of New Moon Bay? Now that they mentioned him, he is indeed something. As for Xian, she suddenly froze after hearing what he said. New Moon Bay, Master Zhang, a chimpanzee? They seem to be talking about Zhang Han? Is it really him? Is he also part of that group? Did he fight with others? A series of doubts kept bothering Xian. Furthermore, she gave up leaving and intended to listen to what they were talking about. At that moment, Gu Pengfing went over from the side of the sofa, with 2 large glasses of red wine in his hand. He handed one to Xian and said with a smile, I added some ice in this glass of wine, which will cool you down. Oh, thank you. Xian stared at Gufang and the people talking with him, so she took the red wine without much thinking. Cheers. Gu Pengfing's eyes sparkled with tension and excitement. He touched his glass with Xian's. Under his gaze, Xian took a small sip. At that point, the conversation in Gufang's group was still in full swing. I heard about this incident. Yanfei thought for a while. In fact, that matter was involved with the military, and he was ordered to drop it. As he was thinking about how to refuse him, Gequanlong, who was sitting beside him, opened his mouth. Protector, he does not need to deal with him in person. Gequanlong sneered and said, I said that I did not find a right opportunity to take action since it was you who invited him and there was safety in numbers, but now I will show him the strength of a heaven stage master. I've decided to tear him apart after 3 days on Mount Yunding. That's a great idea, thank you, Brother Gu. Jiang Zongyao's eyes lit up, and he picked up a glass of wine, then drank it up. The faces of all the others present changed slightly at that time. They could feel that Gequanlong wanted to kill Zhang Han. For those who did not know much about the martial arts world, like Wu Chengdong and Megi, they would feel even more shocked. Do people in this circle usually tear others apart? That is too dark. After Xian heard what he said, the hand holding a glass of red wine trembled slightly. Her heart pounded fiercely and her eyes blinked quickly. She was really confused. Is it Zhang Han? He is going to kill Zhang Han. I need to tell him now. Xian glanced at Wu Chengdong and said directly, I'm sorry, Boss Wu, I'm a little uncomfortable. I have to go back first. Well, you. After thinking for a while, Wu Chengdong responded with a nod. Before he finished speaking, Gu Pengfing interjected, Hey, are you leaving now? It's too early. She is a little uncomfortable, forgive us, child Gu. Xian did not say anything, so Wu Chengdong replied with a smile. Well, that's okay, Xian, let's drink to our acquaintance, Gu Pengfing said with a smile while staring at Xian. At that point, Xian only wanted to leave as soon as possible, therefore, she picked up her glass and drank the remaining red wine. After finishing drinking, Xian wanted to stand up. However, as soon as she got up, she felt powerless and dizzy, as if she had been deprived of oxygen, and then suddenly sat right back. What's wrong with you, elder sister Yan? Zif asked in a hurry. I. Xian raised her right hand with difficulty and subconsciously pressed her hand. But she eventually did not even say anything. Did she drink too fast just now? She is probably not good at drinking wine, Gu Pengfing said. He stood up and waved to the 2 female staff members on the back side, then said, come over to help them and take them to have some rest. Okay. The 2 women walked to the gate, holding Xian under their arms, while Zif was anxiously following them. Elder sister Yan was good at drinking. How was she drunk since she did not drink too much? She had not thought that Gu Pengfing would actually dare to do that in such a grand occasion. Let me walk you to the gate. Gu Pengfing got up and said, following them. Looking at those people's backs, Gufang smiled and slowly shook his head. This guy will have an affair tonight. Li Cheng, who was sitting on the sofa nearby, kept an eye on what was happening. He shook his head and sighed, then looked at Gu Pengfing with envy and whispered. I haven't gotten her for so long, but elder brother Feng succeed in such a short period, it's so. Alas, he's so fortunate in love affairs. Everyone sighed with emotion in succession. Brother Hewitt, superior to them, shook his head after hearing their words. Then he stood up and said, I want to leave, just enjoy yourselves. Goodbye, Brother Hewitt. They all bid farewell to him. After he left, Xuanhuan looked at the man with yellow hair next to her, leaning against him, and asked in a low voice, what's with the love affair? It's... The yellow-haired man leaned down and whispered in Xuanhuan's ear. After Xuanhuan learned the situation, her eyes brightened. She looked at their backs and smiled with disdain. How will you save yourself even if you are cold at ordinary times? Now you have to descend to be someone's plaything? The atmosphere in the hall was really lively. From time to time, some people would go to the head seats to propose a toast and flatter those masters. As for Yanfei, he sat in his seat, full of energy, enjoying the lively atmosphere. The two women were holding Xian under their arms. At that moment, Xian was completely out, soundly asleep. Looking at her, Zif was anxious but unable to do anything. Pengfing's heart thumped and beat faster, and he sized Xian up from time to time, feeling that he was so lucky that day. They headed for the gate. When they were about to arrive at the hotel building, the two women made a turn and walked to the full moon pavilion. We're going the wrong way, Zif said hastily. Just send us out. I'll send elder sister Yan back to have a rest. Why do you still persist on going back since she is totally drunk? Just rest here today. Pengfing laughed and said, Child, I have to go back. Please send us out. Zif raised her eyebrows and said, I told you that you should stay here. Pengfing turned and stared at Zif. Since they were no longer in the banquet hall, he did not intend to keep his purpose a secret. What do you mean? Zif's tone cooled down. Didn't I say it clearly? You have to stay here today and can't go anywhere else. Pengfing sneered. Are you forcing us to stay? Our bodyguards are still here. Zif's eyes widened and her heart gave a great leap, faintly realizing that she had been threatened. Your bodyguards can't come here. Do you think I haven't made thorough preparations? Ha ha, you're so naive. Pengfing sneered. You. Zif became so angry that her face suddenly turned red. She wanted to call for help or stop other people, but she obviously knew it would not work. She was casting about for solutions, and thought the most urgent thing at that moment was to contact Leng Wu and the other bodyguards. So Zif calmed down. At that point, Pengfing's real intention was thoroughly revealed. Seeing Zif's appearance, he smiled with satisfaction and said, You should simply take a good rest and I'll allow you to leave tomorrow morning. After finishing his words, he took the lead and continued walking. They arrived at the 5th floor of the full moon pavilion. In front of a suite stood 4 strong men in suits. Seeing that Xian was sent to the luxury suite by the two women, Zif was completely panicked. What are you doing? Let her go. Zif shouted. Stop shouting. Pengfing frowned and slapped her in the face without any hesitation. Pa. Nobody will hear your scream. Pengfing sneered and grabbed the bag in Zif's hand. Then he pointed to the room next door and said earnestly, This is your room. Go in and have some rest. I swear you will have a terrible death. Zif looked at him with an extremely cold gaze. After finished speaking, she went into the room. Ha ha. Pengfing snorted. He totally looked down on that kind of flimsy threat. Looking at Xian's room, he swallowed and could not wait to go over. During that period, he touched his trouser pocket, then patted himself on the forehead. Fouquet, I left my wallet in the hall. After glancing at the watch, he waved to the two women and said, Change her clothes first. I'll go for my wallet and come back soon. Then he looked at Zif, who had almost walked to the door, and instructed the 4 men, Keep an eye on her and don't let her step out of the room. Yes. Pengfing licked his dry lips and turned to leave in a hurry. He thought that he was too anxious, so he needed to drink a few glasses of wine to calm himself down before taking the bag and returning. Zif stood at the door, glaring at Gepengfing's back with resentment. "Please." The four men approached and said coldly. Zif glanced at them and pushed the door. After entering the room, Zif, who had taken a tough stance, could not even stand up straight. She staggered to the bathroom, closed the door and collapsed on the ground. Then she took the cell phone from under her arm and hurriedly called Leng Yi. Beep, beep, beep. Pick up the phone, pick up the phone, please pick up the phone. Zif was so worried that she burst into tears. Finally, when the sixth warning tone was heard, the phone was connected. Leng Yi, come here now, something is wrong with elder sister Yan, hurry up, room 502 of Full Moon Pavilion, hurry up. What? Let's go. Leng's exhalation was heard from the phone. Through the microphone of Zuf's mobile phone, she could clearly hear a sneer. Ha, ha, you can't go anywhere. Bang, bang, bang. As a thud was heard, they were cut off. Leng and the other bodyguards were in a room of the building on the opposite side of the Full Moon Pavilion. The door was always open, and a middle-aged man was standing at the door. When they were about to leave, he stopped them, so they charged in a melee attack after Leng gave an order. However, they found the enemy could easily defeat them within a move. Peak. Strength. Leng's lip was bleeding, and she looked at the man in front of her in surprise. The next moment, she rushed up again. In the meantime, she made a gesture to her companion. On receiving the instruction, the woman quickly took several steps back and took out her mobile phone, calling Zhao Feng for help. Zif had figured out the situation when she heard what Gepengfing had said. She felt more anxious and quickly dialed Zhang Han's phone number. At that time, in Mengmeng's recreational restaurant, at nearly 9 o'clock, Zhang Han and Mengmeng were watching Boonie Bears on the sofa on the first floor. Suddenly, his phone rang. He picked it up and found it was Zif. When he picked up the phone and heard Zif's cry, he froze. At that moment, his heart seemed to stop beating. He was suddenly short of breath. His pupils sharply shrank. How dare someone touch Ziyan? A puff of strong intention to kill that person climbed on his pupils. Gradually, it covered his entire eye, as if to turn into fierce lightning. The next moment, his heart pounded. He almost could hear the voices of his heart. That was anger, a crazy mood. At that point, Zhang Han completely unlocked the hidden hostility in his heart. Wait for me. Zhang Han became extremely hoarse and low, as if he had said that with great difficulty. Then Zhang Han immediately picked Mengmeng up and rushed out of the restaurant. He directly got into the car with Mengmeng in his arms, then stepped on the gas pedal, driving away at an extremely high speed. Papa. Mengmeng was a little scared at the moment in Zhang Han's arms. Zhang Han looked down at Mengmeng and slowly said, trying his best to leash his overwhelming fury, "Good girl, Mengmeng, just close your eyes and count to 100. Zhang Han's voice trembled. Mengmeng was very obedient. She closed her eyes and caught it in a low voice. After a minute, Zhang Han's mobile phone rang again. He directly pressed the answering key. Boss. Zhao Feng's anxious and cold voice was heard on the phone. Before he finished speaking, Zhang Han said directly, "Get ready." Then he directly hung up the phone. Zif and the others in the company had also started moving. Everyone. Zhao Feng yelled with red eyes, "Go downstairs and make preparations." Clatter. Xuyong, Ahu and the others quickly moved. Instructor Liu, who was standing on the side, put on a fierce expression and said as he waved his hand, "Brothers, take your weapons." People of the Wolf Head detachment switched to the war readiness room and picked up assault rifles respectively, as if they were performing a full-on operation. After a pause, Zhao Feng hurried to his apartment. On the wall of the living room hung a 3-foot sword. Since its hilt and scabbard were engraved with dragons, he called it Dragon Sword. He had picked that sword out of the resources Instructor Liu had gained. He had asked him for it as he had thought it was so beautiful and bore an untrammeled and lofty sentiment. Moreover, Instructor Liu did not care much about those things. so he had sent it to Zhao Feng without any hesitation. He took the sword and directly rushed down the stairs to the first floor. At the moment, there were still a large number of people having no idea what had happened. After inquiring others and learning of the terrible truth, they became extremely angry. About 2 minutes later, the panda car drove over at a high speed. Zhang Han got out of the car, with Meng Meng in his arms. He was expressionless, like a zombie, and Meng Meng was still counting as her eyes were still closed. Zhang Han glanced over and saw a mass of people, nearly 100, standing in front of him. Meng Meng. Zhang Han walked to Xuyong and handed Meng Meng over. Xuyong hurriedly picked her up, and at that time, Zhang Han said while looking at Meng Meng, "Play here for a while, and Papa will come back soon. You're a good child. All right." Meng Meng opened her eyes, pouted, intending to follow Papa, but eventually she nodded obediently. "I see, come back soon." "Okay, I will." Zhang Han smiled with difficulty and touched Meng Meng's head, then glanced at Xuyong. Xuyong understood his intention and walked to the lobby on the first floor, with Meng Meng in his arms. Simultaneously, he said, "Meng Meng, I have a big bear. Give me the car keys," Zhang Han said calmly. After hearing what he said, Zhao Feng hurried to take a few sports cars' keys and handed them to Zhang Han without even checking them. Zhang Han glanced at the keys and then moved quickly. Everyone saw that he approached the black Maybach after shaking his body, then directly opened the door and got in the car. Zoom, zoom, zoom. The engine of the car seemed to growl in anger and quickly moved straight to the road ahead. "Hurry up, get into the cars," Zhao Feng shouted, took out the car key and rushed to a Lamborghini, while Lahu quickly sat in the passenger seat. Zhao Feng drove fast and rushed out. Others moved a little slower. They got into several Mercedes and military Hummers. When they drove the cars and reached the road, the Maybach and the Lamborghini had disappeared. They could only hear the faint roar of the engines in front of them. At that point, there were still many vehicles on the road. Many people witnessed an incredible scene. Whoosh! Suddenly, a black shadow passed by quickly. "What the hell is that?" After taking a closer look forward, many people gasped. That was a black sports car. How fast it was! It was like a ghost in the night. The speed possibly exceeded 300 miles per hour. Does that driver want to die? Plenty of people were totally puzzled. But then, a bright red sports car quickly passed by. After a minute, 2 police cars appeared, which were too far behind to catch up with the 2 sports cars. Just then, sitting in the car, Zhang Han's breath became colder and colder. His murderous intention, like a knife, had already gushed from his body. He felt really anxious. He just wanted to drive fast, much faster, to guarantee Xian's safety. Fortunately, the sound of the engine was very resonant. As he drove by the intersection, the sound moved faster than the car. Some drivers heard the noise, therefore, they slowed down at the intersection and looked over curiously. At first, they only caught sight of a black dot in the distance, then the black dot magnified constantly. As it approached, it looked like an elongated black shadow, roaring past. All the people were startled. So, it took Zhang Han only 12 minutes to arrive at the destination, which was 40 minutes away from the company. He reached the destination, the Dragon Triumph Club, then slammed on the brakes and stopped in front of the main entrance. Boom! Zhang Han opened the door and got out of the car, then rushed into the hotel. Chapter 358. Who's that? The first floor of the hotel was a place for people to rest and there were many tea tables on both sides. With soft music, many people were sitting in chairs and chatting softly. Zhang Han walked in and saw the door leading to the club not far away. Then, he ran quickly. There was a small counter at the door of the club, which was in charge of the members entering the club. Please show your membership card. There were 2 strong men in black suits standing inside the counter. One of them with a beard spoke lazily. Zhang Han ignored the 2 men and rushed ahead. Damn it. The bearded man's eyes widened. Did he come here to cause trouble? He's courting death. He quickly took an electric baton from the drawer and ran from the back door. His companion was surprised and also took out an electric baton, ready to beat down the guy who barged in without showing his membership card. The boss of Dragon Triumph Club was a well-known person. If someone got there to cause trouble and thus got beaten seriously, some high-level people would arrive and settle things, so they didn't worry about anything. "You brat, stop right there. Do you know where you are?" The bearded man with the electric baton snorted when he saw that young man stop. Then, he pressed the button on the electric baton and rushed over. Zhang Han stopped in order to look at the buildings inside. When he saw that the 7-story building on the left was the full moon pavilion, the bearded man had already approached him from behind. Sizzle, sizzle. With the sound of electricity, he raised the electric baton to hit Zhang Han's back. However, when the electric baton was about to fall, in the bearded man's eyes, the young man's right hand swept over like lightning. The target was his neck. He could vaguely see the movements of his palm. "I want to hide. I want to squat down. Even moving sideways would be good." Though he was thinking like that, his body couldn't keep up with his mind and he didn't have the time to move at all. Crack. In his gaze, the palm hit the right part of his neck. He clearly heard the sound of a fracture. Then, his head started buzzing. He didn't know whether a second or two had passed. The bearded man felt unable to breathe, and before he fell unconscious, he saw that the young man in front of him raised his right foot and slightly leaned his body to kick him without turning around. Boom. His body flew backwards, like garbage being thrown out. His body smashed the main door's 2 layers of glass and then fell to the ground. He opened his eyes and faintly saw that the young man ran to the full moon pavilion quickly. Full moon pavilion, Then, the man fell unconscious. Bang! The electric baton in the hand of the bearded man's companion suddenly fell on the ground. He was totally shocked at the moment. What's going on? He wasn't the only shocked one. Hearing that the back door glass shattered, a dozen people who were sitting leisurely in the hall looked over at the same time and the place became silent. The 2 girls at the reception were also stunned. They looked at the back door and didn't know what to do. Gurgle. The bearded man's companion swallowed his saliva and slowly walked up. He reached out his hand to put it on his nose for 5 seconds and then felt his heart beat. He was breathless. He was killed. As his eyes gradually widened, a scream echoed in the hall. As for the bearded man behind, Zhang Han didn't have any special feelings. He didn't even see his appearance clearly. There was only one thought in his mind: to find Xian. Anyone who tried to stop him would be killed. She can't get hurt. Zhang Han was very anxious, so he ran to the full moon pavilion quickly. His mind was filled with Xian's faces and their memories flashed through. Zhang Han knew that Xian was the most important woman for him and he couldn't lose her. If something happened to her, he'd surely go crazy. There were more than 400 meters from the back door to the full moon pavilion, but it only took him 10 seconds. Without no one stopping him after he got in, he found the stairs and rushed to the 5th floor. Then, he found that there were 2 rooms on the left side of the corridor, with 2 women guarding a room and 4 strong men guarding the other. "Who are you? Stop there. Take a step forward, and you'll die." When the 6 people saw Zhang Han approaching quickly, they frowned and then went over to question him. However, those words became the last words that they left in the world. Whoosh! Under those people's attention, Zhang Han moved his body rapidly and what they saw was only his shadow. At the next moment, they felt that the man had passed them and was standing behind. They really wanted to look back, but at that very moment, they just couldn't turn around. He moved his body slightly, turned his head, and then all the 6 people fell over. Bang! Bang! All of them fell on the carpet. That scene had been recorded by the camera in the corridor. If someone watched the video at a normal speed, he would find a black shadow flashing over and then 6 people becoming frozen out of shock. After the shadow disappeared, a man stood behind them and they all fell to the ground. If he slowed it down by 4 times, he would see that the young man flew past them at an incredible speed. Every time he passed 2 people, he used his palm to strike their necks as fast as lightning. It was just like a special effects movie. Anyone who saw that would be totally shocked. However, the staff members in the monitoring room were still chatting and didn't notice what was happening. After dealing with the 6 people, Zhang Han looked up at the door number 502. Then, he held the door handle and turned it, but it didn't move. So, Zhang Han stepped back and raised his right foot to kick the door heavily. Kaboom! The entire door was torn apart by his kick. At that moment, Zhang Han's heart skipped a beat and he rushed in. When he saw that only Xian was lying quietly on the bed, he exhaled. The panic in his heart quietly disappeared and what was left was only fury. There was only one layer of black silk on Xian's body, while her clothes were neatly placed on the bedside chair. Br. Brother-in-law. Suddenly, Zif's trembling words came from the door. When the door was smashed, some people were alarmed, so the people in the monitoring room received a call from the main building counter. After watching the surveillance, they knew that someone had showed up to make trouble. Out of shock, they quickly contacted the security group of the club. However, there were reminders in the phone that some people had been killed and that the troublesome person was extremely dangerous, so they had to be careful. After opening the door, Zif saw that several people were lying on the ground. When she went over and saw Zhang Han, she began to cry sadly. Fortunately, he arrived in time, otherwise, she would not dare to imagine what would happen. Without looking back, Zhang Han responded and then walked to the bed. Looking at Xian that seemed to be asleep, he gently stroked across her cheeks with his fingers, and then he pressed on her neck artery to feel the movements with his spiritual force. He found that Xian had taken some kind of drug that could make people drowsy. After helping Xian put on the beige dress silently, he hugged her in his arms and walked out the door. Brother-in-law, they bullied us. With her cheeks full of tears, Zif still felt a little panicked. All right, it's fine, Zhang Han said very softly, as if he were afraid of disturbing the sleeping Xian. Zhang Han walked in front with Xian in his arms and Zif following behind. After going out the door, she picked up their bags on the ground and walked downstairs. That time, Zhang Han took the elevator. Ding! They arrived at the first floor. Nearly 20 people from the security group were standing there. When they saw Zhang Han, they became nervous and their faces became pale out of panic. They clearly knew that the man in front of them had taken several lives in just a few seconds. Nobody would dare to offend such a powerful man. However, after seeing the woman in his arms, they faintly figured out something. When Zhang Han took a step forward, those security personnel would have to take 2 steps back. When they reached the door and there was no space for them to step back, the crowd quickly scattered to both sides. They watched Zhang Han leave the full moon pavilion without stopping him. Captain, what should we do? Someone asked. We have so many people here, why don't we capture him? Another man asked. Cut the crap, you're courting death, we can't deal with such a powerful man, let's just follow him far behind. The captain stared at them while speaking. What if he runs away? A hothead asked in confusion. Shut your mouth, whether he'll run away or not has nothing to do with you. The captain replied in anger. Therefore, after Zhang Han had left for 100 meters, all those people went to follow him and watched him from afar. At the back door of the main building, Zif was stunned after seeing the pieces of glass and the person lying on the ground. He was lying there in a weird angle with his eyes open. She didn't know whether he was dead or alive. It seems that he was beaten up by brother-in-law. He's really mad this time. There were a lot of people watching the scene in the hall. After seeing Zhang Han, who was holding Xian in his arms, walking out with no expression, they began to discuss in a low voice. They didn't know what was going on. The anti-terrorist forces are coming. I'm afraid that he can't even get out of this door. Did he come to save the beauty? Oh, he's killed so many people. What a sad story. Only 3 minutes have passed. Did so many people come here just to capture him? I guess there's nearly 100 people. Through the glass in the hall, it could be seen that many cars were parked in front of the door. From the Hummer military vehicles with military license plates, as well as the Mercedes-Benzes that seemed to be from a secret force, a large number of people got down, which made people feel shocked. After watching for just a few seconds, some people felt that things were a little weird. Hey, why don't they move? They're all standing there. It doesn't look like they came to capture someone, but to wait for someone. Many of them are armed with guns, so they surely came here to capture people. Otherwise, why did all those people bother to come here? Look, look, he went out. Those people moved. They surrounded him. They'll arrest him. Hey, what is this? Did I see that right? After seeing clearly what had happened, everybody was shocked. They saw that the man walked straight out with the woman in his arms, and all the people in the front gathered around. They didn't raise their guns or shout, "Raise your hand, don't move." Instead, they seemed to care about them very much. That scene was so unexpected, surprising many of them. "Boss, how about madam?" After seeing that Zhang had fainted, Zhao Feng and the others asked nervously. Zhang Han shook his head slightly without saying anything. Then, he went straight to the first Hummer, opened the back door, and put Zhang in the seat very gently. After that, he came out to close the door and looked at Zif. Who was it? The simple question meant that the matter wasn't over yet. Although nothing serious happened to Zhang Han couldn't suppress the fury in his heart. The wrath of an ordinary man could lead him to kill his enemies, making their families mourn. The wrath of a king could lead him to kill all people in the land, making their blood flow for thousands of miles. As for Zhang Han, a super powerful man that had passed the 9-level tribulation, how would his wrath easily subside? It was Gu Pengfeng, Zif replied. Anyone else? Zhang Han asked simply. Number. Master Gu and Protector, he joked about Zhang. Zif replied after thinking about it. Where are they? In the Dragon Hall. Take good care of her. Zhang Han nodded and then turned to walk to the club again. Zhao Feng waved his hand to Elder Meng and several men, telling them to stay there and protect her, while the rest of them all went to follow Zhang Han. It seemed that the whole place would be destroyed by them in an instant. As if a huge army had come, everyone in the hall was shocked with eyes open. These people didn't come here to capture criminals. Who is the man who has killed so many people? After the group of people walked in, the soldiers in Instructor Liu's Wolf-Head detachment set up their guns, showing that they were doing the task seriously. Zhang Han was just like before, walking in without any expressions. However, people had a different feeling toward him. If they thought that he was a lonely hero earlier, he was more like a general who led the whole army at the moment. He looked majestic. When they passed the back door and saw the breathless man lying on the ground, Instructor Liu's mouth trembled slightly. His experience told him that the man was dead. He just realized that the boss seemed to have been involved in a serious matter. As the captain of Wolf-Head, he felt it was a little difficult to deal with that. However, no matter how difficult it would be, he would try his best to do it with the excuse that the other party first detained their people. After Zhao Feng saw that, he thought for a second and then waved his hand, saying, Ahu, bring some people to bring Leng and the others here. Yes. Ahu took 7 people away and went to the right. 4 of them were from the Wolf-Head detachment and they had guns. Even if their enemies were more powerful, they wouldn't be scared of them. Boss, I know Gabengfeng. He's a typical playboy, who has no morals. His father Gafang is also a cunning person. Zhao Feng looked at his master's expression and said slowly, when they were at the company earlier, he felt the coldness around his master and saw from his eyes that he would surely get revenge. At that moment, master was even more indifferent, but Zhao Feng felt that anger was simmering inside him. Family members were master's bottom line. Whoever dared to hurt them would be killed. I'm afraid it'll develop into a serious matter. Zhao Feng could imagine what was going to happen and he even began to think about how to cope with the aftermath. However, After he thought about it, he found there was nothing he could do but to wait and see. Soon, everyone arrived at the Dragon Hall not far away. Looking at the magnificent hall, Zhang Han said indifferently, "Surround this hall. Don't let anyone leave." After hearing that, Zhao Feng's facial expression changed. Feeling that his blood was almost frozen, he made the gesture to surround the place to the people behind him. In an instant, everyone moved and quietly approached the Dragon Hall. In the Dragon Hall, people were all in a good mood after drinking some red wine and they were chatting along. A few minutes ago, Li Cheng, Dachao, Xuanhuan and the others were chatting happily. After Brother Huil left, they completely became relaxed. However, after seeing Gu Pengfeng who had returned, Li Cheng asked with curiosity, "Brother Feng, why did you come back?" "I left my wallet here," Gu Pengfeng said unhappily. "When I saw Xian just now, I was so excited that I forgot to take it." "What's wrong with me? Let's drink." "Brother Feng, did you make it?" the yellow-haired man asked cunningly. "Of course I did. Xian was really gorgeous. I get excited once I think about her," Gu Pengfeng said after a deep breath. "Brother Feng, why did you come back for the wallet? You should cherish the moment with her," Xuanhuan said with a smile. "Ha ha ha." Gu Pengfeng picked up his wallet and laughed. He took out a small pack, where there were 3 white pills, and then threw them into the red wine glass. After drinking it up, he said proudly, "She's such a rare beauty. Of course I should fully enjoy her, so, I've especially prepared some drugs, otherwise, why did I come back and get this damn thing?" "Ah, Mr. Gu, you mean?" Xuanhuan quickly replied with a smile. In fact, she looked down on him deep inside. "You're just impotent. Without drugs, you can't do anything. PFFT, do you think I don't know this?" She remembered when she slept with Gu Pengfeng last time, he also took pills twice. He was less than 30, but had already become impotent. Xuanhuan thought that he couldn't be even called a man after several years. "Here, let's drink more." After Gu Pengfeng drank 3 glasses of red wine, his face was a little flushed. "Wow, cool, it's wonderful. You guys can drink here, I'll go and enjoy my lady." Gu Pengfeng wagged his head and felt excited. Feeling energetic, he thought it was the time for him to prove his ability. He got up and walked away. Li Cheng and the others looked at each other and then smiled, showing that they all knew what would happen. "Look how excited he is, just like a bridegroom," Xuanhuan chuckled while speaking. "Ha ha, that will be a precious moment. How about we also go to enjoy ourselves?" The yellow-haired man looked at Xuanhuan significantly. "We haven't finished drinking, so stop thinking about that, be a good boy." Xuanhuan stretched out her fingers and shook them lightly. "All right, let's drink." The yellow-haired man laughed and then everyone began to drink again. Only Li Cheng had been watching Gu Pengfeng with his sorrowful eyes, feeling upset deep inside. "It seems that I'm destined to miss that beauty." After seeing Gu Pengfeng get out of the main entrance, he sighed lightly. When he was just about to turn his head, he suddenly saw his body fly back. He was stunned and the next scene completely shocked everyone. A few seconds ago, Wolfhead's soldiers and Zhao Feng's men had guarded all the exits of Dragon Hall. When Zhang Han was about to reach the front door, a red-faced figure appeared in front of him. "That is Gu Pengfeng." Zhao Feng fixed his eyes on him and then said that. "Oh." Once Zhang Han said that, Zhao Feng, Instructor Liu and the others felt that he moved his body and went to Gu Pengfeng in the blink of an eye. Gurgle. Instructor Liu swallowed. He hadn't seen Zhang Han fight before, but it seemed that his power was indeed unimaginable. Gu Pengfeng was walking outside happily. When he saw the crowd in front of him, he felt it very weird. He blinked his eyes and was scared when he suddenly found a man standing in front of him. "Who are you?" Gu Pengfeng asked loudly. He was not afraid, because in the hall behind him, there was his uncle and protector nobody dared to make trouble. However, the man in front of him was indifferent. He didn't answer his question, just looking at him quietly. What's he going to do? Gu Pengfeng frowned, feeling that the efficacy of the pills had been dissipated by a lot. When he was about to ask more questions, he felt that his abdomen had been hit severely and his body had been thrown by an irresistible force. He fell to the ground and sweated a lot out of pain. Then, he looked up at the man in front of him and shouted in resentment, "Uncle, someone is making trouble here." His shouts attracted people's attention in the hall. After seeing that, many people's eyes gradually widened, filled with shock. They saw that people who were armed with guns rushed in and went to the left and right sides respectively to surround them. At the same time, they shouted, "Squat down, hands on your head." Falling into panic, all the people quickly put their hands on their heads and squatted down. They also continued to retreat. In 20 seconds, 90% of the people in the hall squatted down and huddled in the corner, which made the space look rather empty. Therefore, Gu Pengfing, who was crawling backwards on the ground, looked very conspicuous. "What?" All the people around Gu Fang stood up in shock. "It's him." Gu Pengfing's face darkened. Jiang Zongyao gritted his teeth and said, "He's Master Zhang of New Moon Bay." "Oh?" Yanfei narrowed his eyes and calmly looked at Zhang Han in the distance. Under everyone's attention, Zhang Han walked towards Gu Pengfing step by step. When he got closer, he lifted his right foot and seemingly stepped lightly on Gu Pengfing's two ankles. Crack, crack. Two fracture sounds were heard, accompanied by Gu Pengfing's growl, "Ah!" As his eyes rounded, he looked at Zhang Han with horror. How dare he beat me? However, the next scene made Gu Pengfing's face become even paler. He saw that the man lifted his foot high and the falling point would be his crotch. No! Gu Pengfing's pupils shrank. The pain of the next moment made him scream at the top of his voice. "Ah!" Then, he couldn't stand the pain and fainted. Zhang Han sneered, looking at Gu Pengfing indifferently. He squatted down and then lifted up the whole person by grabbing his neck. Gu Pengfing was just like a dead dog at the moment. Zhang Han used his spiritual force to ease Gu Pengfing's injury and made him wake up. "Do you know who I am?" Zhang Han stared at Gu Pengfing and stretched out two fingers. When he touched his chin, it was suddenly dislocated and he could not even speak. "Take a close look, you'll be the last one to be killed." After saying those words coldly, he lifted his right foot and kicked Gu Pengfing away. He didn't want Gu Pengfing to die so easily, because he'd let him taste a great horror. The hall was so silent that a needle drop could be heard. People gasps could be vaguely heard and they all looked at Zhang Han in astonishment. Gu Qinlong and the others quickly came to themselves and got extremely angry. "You'll die!" Gu Qinlong shouted and then rushed to Zhang Han. He just took a few steps before Gu Pengfing's body flew over. That time, Zhang Han used a soft power, which seemed to be very powerful, but didn't cause great damage to him. Gu Qinlong caught Gu Pengfing and got furious after checking his injury. The bones of his feet had become powder and that thing was also gone. "I'll kill you." Gu Qinlong rushed up with eyes wide open. After taking 5 steps, he stepped on the ground and his whole person suddenly rose by 2 meters. Then, he stretched out his right leg and planned to kick Zhang Han from above. Zhang Han thought for a second. He would use some mysterious martial arts for the first time after his rebirth. 3 killing fist. Zhang Han stood on tip-top and his spiritual force constantly gathered on his right arm, and then it gathered on each acupoint. If one could see through it, he could see that there were many bright spots in Zhang Han's right arm, like stars in the night sky. Then, those spots were quickly connected and many lines were formed, like a spider web. The spiritual force began to flow and a great power was ready to come out. Soon, Gu Qinlong kicked him heavily. Everybody knew that legs were usually more powerful than arms. Even he Yanfei and the others at the back felt that Master Gu's attack would work out well. However, things didn't develop as they had imagined. Bang, bang, bang. As their fist and foot collided, 3 muffled sounds were heard. After the first punch, Gu Qinlong felt that his right leg was slightly numb and some other spiritual force was invading his body. So, he used his own spiritual force to remove the strange force in one breath. After the second punch, he felt an amazing power. After the third punch, he felt nothing at all. He withdrew his right leg before kicking with the left leg. Then, Zhang Han stepped back, lifted his right leg and kicked Xuanhuan. Xuanhuan followed that force and saw him retreat by 5 meters. After seeing that Zhang Han stepped back by 5 meters, a disdainful smile appeared on his face. He had followed Zhang Han's force earlier. If he stood still and resisted it, he would probably only retreat by 1 meter, while Zhang Han, who was in front of him, retreated by 5 meters. The difference between them could be seen right away. Even He Yunfei, who was in the back, shook his head and said lightly, "This Master Zhang is just so-so, it's easy for Master Gu to get rid of him." He Yunfei's words made Jiang Zongyao feel a little excited. He watched them fighting, looking forward to Master Zhang's failure. "You're just so-so." Xuanhuan smiled disdainfully, and then put his hands on his back, saying calmly, "I planned to get rid of you after 3 days. I didn't expect you to come here voluntarily and hurt my family today. Humphrey, I'll give you a chance to explain yourself before you die. Tell me your intentions." Zhang Han looked at Xuanhuan indifferently, saying word by word, "Came to kill." Ha ha ha. Xuanhuan looked up and laughed, as if he had heard a joke. "Just you? You're too arrogant. Today, Xuanhuan." Before he finished his words, Xuanhuan's face suddenly became red, and then from his right leg, a crisp sound came out. Crack. That sound resounded in everyone's ears. People looked over with horror. Under all people's attention, Xuanhuan's right leg suddenly bent. What? He Yunfei's facial expression changed, with astonishment in his eyes. Chapter 359, To Make a Name. It seemed that their confrontation was unremarkable and Xuanhuan had a lot of advantages. However, after a few seconds, why is Xuanhuan's leg broken? Is this the delayed effect? Is it that he just used some secret methods? Thinking of that, He Yunfei's expression changed. As a senior heaven stage master, he knew more information. In the martial arts world, there wasn't only one group of people who only practiced martial arts as ordinary people thought. Martial arts were just a classification. For example, metaphysics masters could identify what locations would bring good luck or bad luck. They were advocated by the real estate tycoons and many projects had their presence. Some magic masters could use magic to behead someone from thousands of miles away. They used curses or controlled others with magic. However, the starting point of magic masters was relatively high. Even a heaven stage magic master might be less powerful than a martial artist at the same level, but the higher the master's level was, the more difficult it would be to deal with him. Apart from those, there were also many other classifications, such as people with special abilities in the Western world. There were even ancient blood races and tenacious werewolves. The world wasn't as stable as it was supposed to be. He Yunfei knew that even heaven stage masters were only at the bottom of the martial arts world. Only grand masters would have some right to speak. Of course, martial artists didn't only know martial arts, some powerful ones had secret methods. To put it simply, those masters would use some special means of arranging chi to make their movements contain great power that could kill people. Such movements as the 18 subduing dragon palms were also secret methods. Others couldn't learn them just by watching them once, and many special skills were needed. Generally, only Wu Dao Grand Masters had some secret methods, and they were very rare. No one would teach the methods he had learned to others. Even He Yunfei had no secret methods of his own. After seeing the lethality of Zhang Han's punches, he was sure the man must have used some secret methods. He Yunfei was so shocked, not to mention other people. The 3 martial artists, including Jiang Zongyao, didn't understand what was going on. Why was Master Gu's leg just broken like that? Who on earth are they? Why is that person so strong? With his palms shivering slightly, Gu Fang said nervously. He was a little flustered and overwhelmed. What should we do? They've blocked the door and we can't escape. Yeah, Brother Gu, please figure out a way. Don't worry. Jiang Zongyao frowned while looking around, and then he sneered, saying, with Protector He here, it'll be them who won't get out of the door today. Right, if Protector He takes action, that guy will be surely killed in an instant. Another martial artist echoed. Master Gu wasn't on guard and was hurt by his dirty tricks. Guys, don't worry, we can rely on Protector He. Jiang Zongyao looked at Zhang Han angrily. He was standing next to He Yunfei. Although he was a little shocked by Master Gu's injury, he was still quite confident, as if he had already seen He Yunfei killing Zhang Han. It seemed that those people said such things just to force He Yunfei to join the fight. However, He Yunfei didn't care. With his eyes fixed on Zhang Han, he knew that he had to beat some sense into the arrogant young man. It all happened so soon. After Xuanhuan's leg was broken, his face suddenly became red and then darkened. He realized that there were 3 fractures on his right leg. Although he could still fight, he faintly felt that he was no match for that person. How could this be? With his spiritual force gathered on his right leg, he retreated by 10 steps with great pain. Then, he looked up at Zhang Han with astonishment in his eyes. You! How could you be my opponent? Xuanhuan was incredulous and spoke in anger. He didn't understand why he was injured. Even though his spiritual force came to my leg, it has been counteracted by my own force. Why was there some inward strength? Hearing Xuanhuan's words, nearly 100 people at present felt that he was already like a spent bullet. Master Gu is no match for this man. Many people began to look at Zhang Han in a different way, including Jiang Zongyao. Just think about it, if Protector He didn't come today, it would really be a disaster. But there are no ifs in this world. You are dead. Jiang Zongyao looked at Zhang Han with hatred. In the hall, all the people, including Zhou, felt that their brains had gone blank. They were quite confused. After looking at the most prominent heavyweights on the field, they felt that Master Gu should have won against that man, but there was an accident. While being the most powerful, Protector He might take action to fight that man. However, it seemed that he still took a tough stance. Who on earth is he? All people were confused. Under their gazes, Zhang Han stared at Xuanhuan and said lightly, "You're just as weak as an ant in my eyes." After dozens of seconds of adjustment, Zhang Han eased the violent spiritual force inside his body. He reached the Dragon Triumph Club, ran all the way and killed 6 people, which only took 20% of his spiritual force. However, just that one move took 30% and it wasn't so perfect. Therefore, his spiritual force became violent again. He took a few breaths and adjusted himself. There was only 50% spiritual force left, but he felt it was enough. So, he said those things lightly and then walked forward. 1 step, 2 steps. The slight sounds of his footsteps seemed to sound in everyone's hearts, making the atmosphere on the place gradually cool down. After he took 5 steps, Xuanhuan couldn't suppress his anger anymore and madly controlled his spiritual force while roaring, "Go to hell!" After that, he launched his strongest blow. At that moment, He Yunfei, who had stepped forward, stopped moving. He felt that Xuanhuan's attack contained a lot of power. Jiang Zongyao's and the other people's pupils had also shrunk slightly because of that. They also felt great pressure from him. With this blow, he'll definitely die. Jiang Zongyao couldn't control himself and shouted. With his words, all people present became nervous. Did Master Gu just begin to fight back? Even Zhao Feng's pupils shrank, too. This Master Gu is oppressive. Instructor Liu was even more nervous, worrying that Zhang Han was no match for him. So, he grabbed the gun in the hands of one soldier next to him and pointed to Xuanhuan. He planned to shoot him to death if Zhang Han lost. Gurgle. Instructor Liu swallowed his saliva and pointed his gun at Xuanhuan's leg. Soon, Master Gu gathered his power and suddenly stamped his left foot. Then, his whole body became like a cheetah, with his hands looking like eagle claws, and he rushed forward. However, when he had just moved forward by 1 meter, and he was 10 meters away from Zhang Han, something happened. Suddenly, under everyone's gazes, Zhang Han's body suddenly split into two. One in the front and one at the back. Soon, they split into 3, 4. In the end, 7 figures were seen. The 7th figure was already standing in front of Xuanhuan. Then, the figure that was standing 10 meters away earlier slowly disappeared. What the hell is this? Replication? Oh no. They are after images. He moved so fast that our eyes couldn't keep up with him. God, how fast was he? Oh no. Protector, he was shocked and immediately rushed up. However, with 30 meters away from the field and without that horrendous speed, how could he arrive the first? Just when he moved his body, a sickening thud was heard in front of him. In front of everyone, Zhang Han quickly punched Xuanhuan in his chest. Boom! Xuanhuan's eyes were wide open, and were gradually filled with blood streaks. The spiritual force that he had gathered was all counteracted by that punch. How could he move so fast? Xuanhuan couldn't imagine that a person who had just reached the profound stage would move at such an incredible speed. Feeling the fractures in the chest and the heavy internal injuries in his body, Xuanhuan was totally shocked. The next moment, Zhang Han lifted his right knee and hit him in the abdomen, followed by a kick. Thus, Xuanhuan's body was bent as a shrimp and flew away. Poof! Xuanhuan, who was flying backwards in the air, spat a few mouthfuls of blood. People present couldn't believe their eyes. How could this be? Jiang Zongyao's face became pale. He's just a profound stage master, while Master Gu is a heaven stage master. How can he defeat him? Many people gasped in astonishment since it was the first time for them to see someone to be kicked away like that. Master Gu was still in full swing just now, but it seems that the other man is more powerful. Just at that moment, He Yunfei also approached Zhang Han. With a 0.3 meter long dagger in his right hand, he planned to stab Zhang Han in his neck. Zhang Han stepped back and then lifted his leg to attack He Yunfei's waist. He kicked so fast that even his trousers made some sounds. He Yunfei was stunned and then lifted his left knee to resist it. Boom! The confrontation made He Yunfei retreat by 5 meters and Zhang Han retreat by 10 meters. Since Zhang Han stepped back, He Yunfei didn't chase him. Instead, he looked back quickly. Xuanhuan fell to the ground. He covered his chest and spat out 2 mouthfuls of blood again. Then, he looked at He Yunfei and said weakly, Protector help me. Kill him. He Yunfei frowned. Then, he turned to look at Zhang Han and sneered, saying, He Yunfei am still here, but you're so unscrupulous. Don't blame me for being too cruel. Just then, Instructor Liu rushed to Zhang Han and said in his ear anxiously, He Yunfei is the protector of the National Security Agency. He's been at the heaven stage for 5 years, so, his strength is extraordinary. Don't be rash. How about we just let it go? Let it go? He Yunfei sneered and looked straight at Zhang Han, saying, Kid, I can spare your life today. If you break your arms and crawl out of here, I'll show you some mercy. As soon as he said that, the atmosphere on the field became tense. Then, Jiang Zongyao eagerly reminded him at the back, You can't let him go, Protector such a monster must be killed today. Protector Xuanhuan yelled hoarsely with great pain. There was strong hatred in his words. Without turning back, Protector looked straight at Zhang Han. If he doesn't yield, I'll fight him myself. If he yields, I'll still fight him, but I won't kill him. Xuanhuan and the others can deal with his life. No matter how he chose, there would be only one result. Just then, some sounds came from the door. Master a man in his 30s yelled. He was followed by Ahu and his men, as well as 6 women, including Leng. 3 of them pointed the gun at the man as they entered the hall. I was guarding those bodyguards and these people suddenly came from nowhere. They ignored the rules and took me here. You must punish these undisciplined people severely. Master The man snorted and said, he was the registered disciple of He Yunfei, a servant in the Gu family. After finishing his words, he saw the scene inside. with Gu Pengfing and Xuanhuan were lying on the ground. Then, he was shocked. "Come here." He Yanfei frowned. The man felt that the atmosphere was too weird, so he walked quickly without saying anything. Unfortunately, he chose the wrong way. His eyes fixed on the people around with guns and he was guessing their backgrounds and intentions, yet he completely ignored Zhang Han and Instructor Liu who were standing in the front. "Now, tell me, your choice." He Yanfei's eyes fixed on Zhang Han again. It seemed that he would show mercy, but it contained a hidden danger. Zhang Han looked at He Yanfei indifferently without saying anything, just listening to the footsteps from behind. Suddenly, Zhang Han moved his left hand and spread the palm, using it as a knife. Crack! A muffled sound came from the neck of the man who wanted to go back, and then his head tilted at an incredible angle. Dong! He fell to the ground, breathless. Hiss! What? All the people present were shocked. He's obviously dead. Ah! All the people, including Li Cheng, Xuanhuan, Wu Chengdong, Meiki, felt that their hearts were about to jump out of their mouths. They knew that the situation was going to be uncontrollable. Even Instructor Liu's body trembled. He thought that Zhang Han would stop, since both Xuanhuan and Gu Pengfing had been seriously injured. He didn't expect him to continue to fight. However, he didn't expect that it was just the beginning. "You." He Yanfei's face completely darkened and he stared at him in great anger. He held a dagger in his right hand, which reflected a great coldness, and pointed it at Zhang Han. "I must kill you today, and all the people who are helping you won't be spared." He Yanfei's cold voice resounded in the hall. "Boss." Seeing that He Yanfei was about to move, Zhao Feng quickly called him and threw out the long sword in his hand. He was very glad that he brought the dragon sword with him. If Master fights against him without any weapons, I'm afraid he'll suffer. Without looking back, Zhang Han stretched out his left hand and caught the sword. With a slight force downwards, the scabbard was wedged 3 inches into the ground and stood there. At the same time, Zhang Han held the handle with his right hand and slowly pulled out the sword. Screech! The sword screeched, as if it passed through people's hearts. Under everyone's attention, the long sword finally got out of the sheath. With it in his hand, people suddenly felt that Zhang Han had become fiercer. Humphrey! Suddenly, Zhang Han laughed disdainfully. He looked at He Yanfei and said calmly, "How dare just a heaven stage master ask me to break my arms and crawl out of here?" After that, Zhang Han stepped toward He Yanfei. Every single step of his gave people a strong sense of oppression and their eyes were all fixed on Zhang Han's calm face. He said, "It seems that I'm still too low-key. Now even a nobody from nowhere dares to threaten me. Alright then, I'll make a name by killing all of you." Chapter 360, Supremacy Over All. Zhang Han only said 5 sentences. He took 5 steps while speaking. With 5 steps, he moved by 10 meters. Standing 10 meters away from He Yanfei, he looked at him calmly. Each of them was holding a blade. It seemed that the fierceness that was brought by the swords was about to sweep through the entire hall and break through the clouds. If Zhang Han was a strong martial artist in everyone's eyes a while ago, he was like a grand master who had shown his full power to everyone at that moment. The fury hidden at the bottom of his heart constantly increased the energy of his whole body. In the end, all the people, including He Yanfei, felt his pressure. He was like a dragon that just woken up, who was looking at the whole world disdainfully with his scary eyes and sharp fangs. Pressure? The strong just should make the weak feel pressured. As his body trembled, Jiang Zongyao looked at Zhang Han in a different way. He was scared. He was terrified. He never thought that a person would scare him just by standing there. He knew that if he were that man's opponent, he'd be killed in an instant. Oh my God! Wu Chengdong and the others felt that their blood had frozen, as if it were the cold winter, not summer. They vaguely guessed that it might have been caused by that man's energy. This is my master. This is an immortal. He's invincible. Zhao Feng looked at him in excitement. How strong is he? Instructor Liu's brain went blank and he felt it was incredible. That was He Yunfei in front of him, yet the boss still called him a nobody. Not only them, Ahu and the others were also shocked after seeing that. They wanted to say from the bottom of their hearts, "Boss, you're awesome." People around them were shocked, while He Yunfei, who was at the center of the vortex, felt an inexplicable pressure. I only saw such energy once from Emperor King years ago. Oh no. His energy is even stronger than Emperor King's. Who on earth is he? He Yunfei wasn't as relaxed as a while ago. He looked at Zhang Han seriously, slightly frowning and motionless. He didn't move, while Zhang Han stood 10 meters away from him. The hall was as silent as the grave. All the people stared at them and they felt that a fierce fight was about to begin. Suddenly, Zhang Han opened his mouth. He was still indifferent, but there was also contempt in his words. "I'll give you 3 chances to make your move." "What did you say?" He Yunfei was stunned, saying, "Isn't that what I should tell you? You're not qualified," Zhang Han said lightly. "Ha ha ha." He Yunfei laughed loudly and then said, "I started to study martial arts when I was 10. I mastered inward strength at the age of 20 and peak strength at the age of 22. When I was 25, I mastered chi strength and became a master. I reached the earth stage when I was 30 and reached the heaven stage at the age of 37. Now I'm 42. In the next 5 years, I'm expected to break through the heaven stage and become a grand master. I can't be compared with such talents as Emperor King, but what about you? You just reached the profound stage, yet you dare to say that I'm not qualified. You have 1 minute left." Zhang Han ignored him and said directly, "Outrageous." He Yunfei gave him a murderous look and said, "I haven't seen how powerful you are, yet you're so arrogant. I've killed over 10 people who were just like you. You won't be the first one that I kill, nor the last one." 50 seconds. Zhang Han counted the time. "Good. Since you're courting death, then don't blame me." Zhang Han's attitude made He Yunfei furious. After saying that, he became silent. Then, he stared at Zhang Han for 2 seconds. Suddenly, his body moved. He was just standing still like a pine, but the next moment, he was as nimble as an escaping hare. He moved very fast and his figure became a little fuzzy, but he wasn't like Zhang Han, who directly left 7 shadows in front of people's eyes. It could be seen that He Yunfei didn't move as fast as Zhang Han. He Yunfei didn't choose to jump into the air and accumulate more power to attack him. In his view, dealing with an enemy like Zhang Han, who could move very fast, jumping so high as Xuanhuan did was extremely stupid. Although it would be more powerful, flexibility was more important. It seemed that He Yunfei had just reached Zhang Han in the blink of an eye. The dagger in his right hand was held horizontally, which reflected fierceness and coldness. Then, a sneer appeared around the corners of his mouth and he planned to stab Zhang Han directly in his heart. The people present saw everything as a blur when He Yunfei raised his arm and moved his blade. Just then, Zhang Han raised his 0.3-meter-long sword in his hand and some even more dazzling light made all the people narrow their eyes. Their movements were so fast that their hands could hardly be seen clearly. People could only hear the sounds of the weapons colliding with each other. The intensive collision of their weapons sounded for only 2 seconds. The next moment, people saw He Yunfei's body retreat rapidly. "Who's the winner?" All the people gradually held their breaths and an exclamation was heard at last. "Who on earth are you?" He Yunfei cried out involuntarily. Their confrontation made him feel the long-lost crisis of life and death. He thought his moves were fast enough with wily angles. However, the sword in his opponent's hand seemed to have become a shield, so no attack on him was effective. Finally, he felt that his swordplay was so powerful that he had to pull back. He was totally shocked after realizing what had happened. Swordplay? He knows swordplay, he's just a profound stage master. Since when did a profound stage master have such high swordplay skills? In general, Reaching the profound stage was just a start, and he could only be called a beginner. Only when he reached the earth stage or the heaven stage could he know of swordplay. However, the man opposite to him was incredible. You still have 2 chances in 35 seconds. Zhang Han didn't answer him and still said calmly. After Zhang Han said that, no one dared to despise him, and even Zhang Zongyao was a little scared. What if Protector he loses again? That question came up in his mind involuntarily. Thinking about it for a second made his face become pale out of fright. I'll counterattack. Feeling that he had been humiliated, He Yunfei shouted and then rushed toward Zhang Han like lightning. When he went closer, He Yunfei moved his left hand and 3 5-star darts dropped from his sleeve. Whoosh! He moved his arm and then the 3 darts soon flew away. The first one flew to Zhang Han's head, the second one to his neck and the third one to his heart. 3 key points completely revealed He Yunfei's determination to kill him. In fact, he used the 3 darts just to distract his attention. His real weapon was still the dagger in his hand. After the 3 darts went out, He Yunfei moved his body. He suddenly doubled the speed and his body kept up with the darts. Then, he erected the dagger in his hand and planned to stab Zhang Han in his chest. Getting stabbed in each of the 4 points would be fatal. Even if Zhang Han could escape the darts, I can still end his life with my powerful dagger. He Yunfei even used that trick to kill a master who was at the peak of the heaven stage. Therefore, he was full of confidence. It seemed that time was flowing slowly at the moment. Everyone held their breaths. There was excitement in Jiang Zongyao's eyes, because he was expecting Zhang Han to die. Ge Pengfeng, who was lying on the ground and speechless, finally became excited. He was also looking forward to Zhang Han's death. Ge Qinlong, who was also lying there, gradually widened his eyes and didn't want to miss the scene where he would be avenged. There were concerns in Zhao Feng's eyes, since he knew that He Yunfei's move was too fierce. Hu and the others were extremely nervous. They wanted to scream, but they didn't have the time. Under everyone's gazes, He Yunfei's darts and dagger were getting closer to Zhang Han. But the next moment, clang, clang, they suddenly found that Zhang Han's figure was blurred and then his sword had been raised. He squatted a little, raising the sword with his right hand and pressing on its tip with the left hand, and the 3 darts had been bounced away. Clang! With the last sound, He Yunfei's dagger met Zhang Han's sword, curving it slightly. Such a fatal trick had just been counteracted in such an easy way. He Yunfei was shocked. He slowly looked up and finally saw that calm face. Hiss! Suddenly, He Yunfei felt the crisis and wanted to pull back. However, Zhang Han's foot went faster. He kicked him in his abdomen, causing him to step backwards quickly. Fortunately, that kick wasn't that powerful. After retreating by over 10 steps, He Yunfei stood still and his facial expression changed completely. He Yunfei's fingers trembled, thinking that if he stabbed him just then, he would probably hurt himself severely. When he was about to speak, Zhang Han interrupted him coldly. The last move, in 25 seconds. How is this possible? Jiang Zongyao felt that his whole world had collapsed. Had He Yunfei lost? Ge Qinlong and the others were very upset. The most powerful man among them is still unable to defeat him? Wu Chengdong, Meiki, Li Cheng and the others all felt that their blood had almost frozen. They hadn't expected that the battles between martial artists would be so fierce. They hadn't even expected that man to be so strong. How did you block them? He Yunfei couldn't help but ask. Do you want to hurt me with such simple tricks? Zhang Han replied coldly. He Yunfei's face darkened immediately. It was the first time that he had gotten such an evaluation. Since you can bring some people here, I'm sure that you're also some influential man. Let's just stop it here, or I'll report it to the authorities. Look at the trouble you've made. Have you thought about the consequences? He Yunfei knew that he had already lost and the third move wasn't necessary at all. Because his strongest skill had no effect and there was no need to fight again. However, he wasn't afraid. because those people with guns must be from an army. Since he could bring them over, he must be an official, too. Therefore, he would certainly be punished. However, he hadn't expected that the man would be so strong. "You have the last 15 seconds, Zhang Han replied calmly. "What do you mean? Look how many people have been hurt. Do you still want to continue?" Yanfei frowned and scolded him. "Young man, don't be too arrogant. Even if I can't kill you, there are people who can deal with you." 10 seconds. Yanfei stared at Zhang Han and only found indifference in his eyes. He felt disappointed. This man is being serious. He's ready to fight. Thinking of that, Yanfei's heart skipped a beat, since he felt great pressure. Then, he said in a deep voice, "Who on earth are you? What are you here for?" "Oh?" Hearing his words, Zhang Han had a slight reaction. He began to recollect while saying slowly, "You can call me Zhang Han Yang." That was an ancient name. He made himself conspicuous with that name from over 400 years ago in the cultivation world. At that time, he experienced the cruelty of the world and felt that even the sunlight was cold. Therefore, he remembered the word, Han Yang, which meant cold sunlight. In the last few years, he became famous and that name also resounded most of the cultivation world. That was also the origin of the name, Han Yang Immortal. At that moment, he suddenly remembered that people still didn't know what Gepengfing had done, so he had to say something. Every time Zhang Han said a sentence, he would take a step forward. With each step, people would feel that he was becoming much fiercer. "The only purpose of my coming here is to use your blood to tell the world, I am Zhang Han Yang. As for the reason, it's because Gepengfing was trying to touch my woman." "Oh, right. I forgot to tell you, my woman is called Xian." Kaboom! After hearing that, all the people, including He Yanfei, Jiang Zongyao, Gefang, Gequanlong and Wu Chengdong, were completely shocked. He turned out to be Xian's. This, my God! Wu Chengdong and Meki looked at each other in astonishment and their heartbeats accelerated. Xian actually has such a powerful husband and she has never said it before. Hiss. Wu Chengdong felt a little dizzy. It is no wonder that when Xian was in trouble in Shangjing, someone came to her rescue. It is no wonder that Lin Ji, who is one of top 4 influential young men in Shangjing, has suffered a loss. It turned out that there's such a powerful man behind her. Fu Shan, who was sitting in the corner on one side, also trembled. How could this be? What should I do? He was so scared that his whole body couldn't stop trembling. He's Xian's man, yet I've made so much trouble for her. If she told him about that, I'd definitely be doomed. After thinking of that, Fu Shan felt desperate. At the same time, Li Cheng also had similar feelings. His face darkened. Fortunately, he didn't use such a sinister trick, or he'd be the one being killed. Xu was also stunned, who felt powerless and fell to the ground. She has such a powerful man. How can I compare with her? It turns out that I'm really a clown in her eyes. I still wanted to surpass her. It's ridiculous. I was just daydreaming. While she was thinking about that, she looked at Zhang Han and a question came up in her mind. Why don't I have such a powerful husband? Then, she noticed the yellow-haired man who was shivering next to her and felt a bit resentful. The person who felt the most regretful was Gepengfing. After hearing Zhang Han's words, he felt an uncomfortable surge all over his body. Not only he felt the physical pain, he also suffered great mental pain. He constantly recalled what Brother Hua said earlier. Such a beauty as her is not easy to get. You should reconsider it. Right. I should reconsider it. I should think more about it. How can such a stunner be owned by an ordinary man like me? Why didn't I think about that? I should think twice. Gepengfing was extremely remorseful, but the medicine he ate earlier wasn't a cure for regret. Zhang Han's words also made people understand something. Gepengfing took Xian away, because he had some evil thoughts. No wonder he brought so many people here. It's totally reasonable. People subconsciously believed that after Zhang Han said the cause of the incident, the whole thing would end after Ge Pengfing made an apology. Even He Yunfei thought so. Every debt has its debtor, since it was Ge Pengfing who. Before he finished his words, Zhang Han interrupted him. Time is up. Whoosh. He Yunfei saw that Zhang Han moved his body and quickly came to him with the sword in his hand. So, he hurriedly stepped back sideways and lifted the dagger to resist. He moved his dagger, only to find that he was fighting with air. The sword seemed to be illusory. Oh no. He Yunfei felt a crisis of life and death. Only at that moment did he realize that the sword was an illusion. Wait. Where's the real sword? In his pupil, Zhang Han's figure moved from the right to the left in an instant. Then, he felt some people were in danger. Oh no. In other people's eyes, after Zhang Han went to him, He Yunfei moved sideways. The next moment, Zhang Han moved his body and stepped forward for half a meter, while He Yunfei stood still. However, Zhang Han didn't stop moving. He grabbed the dagger from He Yunfei's hand and threw it away, which flew to Gefang's chest, who was near the sofa. Zhang Han kept moving, taking the sword in his hand to stab Jiang Zongyao. Before Jiang Zongyao realized that, he had directly stabbed him in the chest. Then, Zhang Han put his right foot down. It fell on Ge Qinlong's neck. Bang, bang, bang. Several sounds were heard. He Yunfei wanted to look back, so he moved his body slightly, but suddenly, he kneeled down and fell to the ground. The dagger he used before was stabbed in Gefang's chest. Even without making a sound, he had already died. Jiang Zongyao's eyes couldn't be focused. He tried to look at Zhang Han and wanted to say something. However, Zhang Han directly pulled out the sword. Then, Jiang Zongyao fell to the ground. His breath had left him. It only took Zhang Han 3 seconds to kill those 4 people. The cost of those 3 seconds was that he had overdrawn his spiritual force and physical strength. Zhang Han took the sword with his hand and its tip was against the ground. The sword was even curved, while supporting his body. Ge Qinlong and He Yunfei, who were heaven stage masters, were almost as powerful as the people who were at the late stage of chi refining. However, their use of spiritual force was too poor. If He Yunfei's movements were more powerful, Zhang Han would have probably not defeated him. Luckily, that didn't happen. Gefang was completely frightened. He stood up and ran to the corner while screaming. Other people also reacted the same. They couldn't stop screaming and the crowd fell into a panic. Just at that moment, crack, 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 a burst of gunfire sounded. Everybody, squat down, don't move. Zhao Feng fired several shots at the ceiling while shouting. All the people shivered and then quickly squatted down. A third of them were too scared to raise their heads. After a minute, Zhang Han's physical strength recovered a little. He looked around at the crowd and no one dared to look at him. In the end, his eyes fixed on the 2 remaining martial artists. Their faces were pale out of fright and one of them hurriedly begged for mercy. Master Zhang, I'm not related to this. I have nothing to do with this. Please let me go. Please let me go. The other one also realized it and hurriedly begged, I'm also not related, Master Zhang. Zhang Han thought for a moment and then ignored them. After looking around, he said slowly, you should be glad that nothing serious happened to Xian, otherwise, no one would leave this place alive today. Once hearing that, all the people felt relieved. A few people looked up at Zhang Han. At that moment, they felt that he was like a god in charge of life and death. If he wanted you to live, you'd be safe and sound, but if he wanted you to die, you wouldn't have a chance to breathe. That moment, that scene had been deeply imprinted on everyone's hearts. However, Zhang Han's following words made them nervous again, since he said lightly, Xiao Feng, yes, break the legs of everyone here to punish them. After hearing the words, Zhao Feng looked around the room. It seemed that there were nearly 100 people in total. To break all their legs, he was shocked by that idea. However, in the face of Zhang Han's words, he wouldn't say number. Since it's already developed like this, What's that to be worried about? Yes. Zhao Feng responded before making a gesture to Ah Hu and the others. Instructor Liu had been completely shocked next to him. What the well, Gafang, Gequanlong, Master Jiang and Protector He are all dead. What should I do? He was completely at a loss at that moment. Master Jiang. Suddenly, Meiki, who was flustered and anxious, ran to Zhang Han and said eagerly, I'm Meiki, Xian's director. We're good friends. Really? Me too. Wu Chengdong and Xu Yuo said quickly, but they didn't finish their words. Crack. Ah. With the two sounds, their words came to an abrupt end. They were the only ones who dared to stand out. Li Cheng and Fu Shan came from the same company as them, but they didn't dare to breathe at that moment. They just squatted at the back, silently waiting for the punishment. Seeing that scene, many people were disappointed. Even the people from their own company couldn't be spared. How would they survive? Under many people's attention, Zhang Han slowly moved to the direction of the door. He forgot about me. It's great. Gepengfeng, who was lying at the back, looking at Zhang Han's back with his eyes narrowed, he thought he might be able to escape. However, when Zhang Han walked to the scabbard that was inserted in the ground, he moved his hand and put the sword back in. He took another step forward while Gepengfeng felt relieved at that moment. Suddenly, his right foot moved. He kicked the sword and caught it in his hand. Then, he turned his head back. He's staring at me. Hiss. Gepengfeng's body trembled. He didn't forget me. He'll kill me. I told you that you'd be the last one. Gepengfeng heard Zhang Han's words, and then, he saw that horrible man throw the sword away randomly. The sword was constantly rotating, which was getting bigger and bigger in his eyes. Then, Zhang Han walked away directly. After walking out the door, he stood still to relax his numb muscles, listening to the constant screams in the hall behind him. His eyes were filled with indifference, without any mercy. About a minute later, Zhao Feng and the others came out. All done, Zhao Feng said in a low voice. All right, let's go. Zhang Han said calmly and then took the lead to leave. Instructor Liu asked about 20 people to guard the hall and then took the others to follow Zhang Han by his side. Boss. Instructor Liu looked at Zhang Han, who was very calm as if nothing had happened, and laughed bitterly. Then, he said, this incident will cause a sensation in both the martial arts world and the government. I'm afraid that it's not easy to wind it up. Oh. Zhang Han glanced at him and said, if there is any news, just tell me in advance. There is no better way. I'll try my best. Instructor Liu replied helplessly. It was the best time for him to offer support, so, he was determined to help him. The group of people walked all the way to the door, while more than a dozen police officers were standing in the hall seriously. I'm in charge of this now, you can leave. Instructor Liu strode over, then, he took out his black certificate and shook it in front of them. After looking at it, the captain was shocked by the origin of their team. Then, he left after a salute. In astonishment, the female receptionist saw that the perpetrator was escorted out and then got in a Hummer, which left slowly. Zhang Han, Zhao Feng, Ah Hu and the others left, while Instructor Liu and his men stayed there. He really had a headache, feeling that it would be difficult to clean up the mess. Back at the hotel, he took out his mobile phone and dialed a number. Uncle. Bad news, it's disastrous. You have to figure out a way. I really can't stand it.